This is a compilation of over 2.5 hours of Elder Scrolls V lore explained, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with Elder Scrolls' greatest secrets. Skyrim has been out for over a decade, and most players still haven't found half of what's actually in it. Not Easter eggs, not glitches. Real lore, hidden quests with no markers, secrets buried so deep, the only way to find them is to slow down and actually look. Today we're covering 10 of the best, starting with a ghost that quietly destroys everything you thought you knew about the most important man in Tamriel's history, Old Hroldan. Old Hroldan Inn is one of those places most players pass through once and never think about again. Small, forgettable tavern along the Karth River in the Reach. But rent Tiber Septim's room for 10 gold and sleep there past 1 a.m., and something happens that will change how you understand the civil war you've been fighting. You wake up to the innkeeper Adis, screaming. A ghost is standing in the room, dressed in ancient Nord armor, and when you talk to him, he says one word that breaks everything. He calls you Hjalti. Here's where it gets weird. The ghost is a soldier from a battle fought centuries ago. He tells you that Hjalti promised to make him a sworn brother after they sacked Hroldan together. He asks you to retrieve Hjalti's sword from a nearby Forsworn camp, and when you bring it back, he mentions something specific. The sword masters of Alcair who trained Hjalti. That detail is everything. Official Imperial history says Tiber Septim was a pure-blooded Nord born in Atmora, destined to rule. The Thalmor call him a fraud. The Stormcloaks worship him as their cultural North Star. The entire Civil War runs on competing claims about who he was. But an in-game book called the Arcturian Heresy presents a suppressed alternative account. Tiber Septim's real name was Hjalti Earlybeard, and he trained with swordmasters in Alcair High Rock. That makes him possibly Breton, not Nord at all. The ghost confirms every single detail the heresy claims. He uses the name Hjalti. He references Alcair specifically. He recognizes the Dragonborn as his old commander, most likely because both share dragon blood. This isn't theory. This is Bethesda embedding a counter-history into a ghost that only appears if you rent a specific bed in a specific inn in the middle of nowhere. Most players never find it. Those who do walk away knowing the theological foundation of Skyrim's entire civil war is built on something nobody agreed on, not even the people who were actually there. But if a hidden ghost rewriting Imperial history sounds like a big secret, wait until you hear about the college wizard who accidentally solved the greatest mystery in Elder Scrolls history by vanishing into thin air. Arniel's Endeavor. Arniel Gane is easy to miss. He's a Breton conjurer who shuffles around the Hall of Attainment at the College of Winterhold, muttering about research and refusing to tell anyone what he's actually doing. Most players talk to him once, get nothing useful, and move on. That is a massive mistake. The quest Arniel's Endeavor has 4 phases, and it only unlocks after you've completed hitting the books for the college main quest. The first few stages look like standard fetch work. Collect 10 Dwemer cogs, track down a shady fence named Enthyr to get a warped soul gem, use a spell called Arniel's Convection to heat the gem inside Dwemer convectors scattered across Skyrim. Then, in the final phase, Arniel asks for something that should make every Elder Scrolls fan stop dead: keening. If you played Morrowind, you know exactly what that is. Keening is one of the 3 legendary tools of Lord Kagrenac, the Dwemer chief tonal architect. At the Battle of Red Mountain in 1E700, Kagrenac used his tools on the heart of Lorkhan, and the entire Dwemer race vanished. Every single one of them, simultaneously. Nobody knows where they went. It is the biggest unsolved mystery in the franchise. Arniel is trying to replicate it, and here's the kick. He does. You hand him keening. He strikes the warped soul gem with it. There's a flash of light, and Arniel Gane disappears. Completely. No body, no ash, no trace. Exactly like the Dwemer. In Morrowind lore, wielding keening without the protective gauntlet, Wraithguard was supposed to kill the user. Arniel doesn't die. He vanishes. That distinction matters, because it suggests whatever happened to the Dwemer wasn't death. It was something else. Transportation, soul trapping, a different plane entirely. The reward for completing the quest is a conjuration spell that lets you summon Arniel's Shade to fight alongside you, his ghost, which means the game quietly confirms he still exists, somewhere, in some form. Nobody at the college ever mentions he's gone, but as dark as Arniel's fate is, at least we know what happened to him. The Dwemer who created keening in the first place, their story runs even deeper, and it's buried under a mountain, lost to the ages. The Dawnguard DLC has a side quest most people never finish, and some never even start. It's called Lost to the Ages, and it begins in one of 2 ways. Either you pick up a book called The Ethereum Wars by an author named Taran Dreth, or you wander into a Dwemer ruin called Argenthams in the Reach and find a ghost standing in the rubble. The ghost is Katria. She's a Nord scholar, and the first thing she tells you is that the book you might have read, the one credited to Taran Dreth, is hers. He was her apprentice. He stole her research, published it under his own name, and left her to die in the ruins she was exploring for him. She's been haunted haunting Arkenthams ever since, and she needs you to finish what she started. What she discovered is this. Around 1E221, Dwemer miners found a deposit of a crystalline material called Etherium deep in Blackreach. It was luminescent blue, connected to Etherius itself, and the artifacts it produced were unlike anything else in Tamriel. 4 Dwemer city-states formed an alliance to mine it: Arkenthams, Raldbathar, Amzulft, and Batharzel. They built a forge beneath Bathoft in the Rift, using magma to smelt the crystal, and for a while it worked. Then greed destroyed everything. The alliance collapsed. The 4 cities went to war with each other over control of the forge and its supply. The conflict lasted decades, draining all 4 of their strength, and when Nordic High King Geller finally conquered them, history credited his military genius. The real reason they fell was that they'd already torn themselves apart from the inside. The Nords didn't defeat the Dwemer defeated themselves. The quest sends you to collect 4 Etherium shards from ruins across Skyrim, which combine into the Etherium crest and reveal a hidden lift to the forge. The Forge Master, a fire-breathing dwarven centurion, guards it. Beat it, and you forge one of 3 genuinely powerful artifacts. But the real payoff is Catria. She witnesses the forge, finds her peace, and moves on to Sovngarde. Justice, after a fashion. Then Tarandreth shows up as a random encounter afterward if you're carrying the artifact. He recognizes it, demands it, and attacks. The game lets you kill the man who stole her life's work. It doesn't announce this. It just happens. But hidden Dwemer secrets aren't exclusive to underground ruins. The most devastating one in the entire game is written on a stone tablet in plain sight, in a tower most players rob without ever stopping to read it. Knight Paladin Gelebor. The Falmer are everywhere in Skyrim. Blind, hunched, feral things that swarm Dwemer ruins and attack on sight. The game treats them as generic dungeon enemies, and most players do too. Kill them, loot them, move on. But the Dawnguard DLC has a quest called Touching the Sky, and buried inside it is a character who reframes everything you thought you knew about what the Falmer actually are. The Forgotten Vale is a hidden region, accessible only through Darkfall Cave. It's enormous, isolated, and almost entirely optional. Deep inside, in a structure called the Chantry of Auriel, you meet Knight Paladin Gelebor. He's a snow elf, not a Falmer, an actual uncorrupted snow elf, the last one you'll ever meet, and he's been waiting inside that chantry for thousands of years. He tells you everything. The snow elves were a civilized people. They had temples, a pantheon, a warrior-priest tradition. Ysgramor's genocidal campaign drove them underground, and the Dwemer offered sanctuary. Gelebor calls what happened next the betrayal. The Dwemer forced the snow elves to consume toxic fungi that caused permanent, irreversible blindness. Then they engineered it, so the fungi became essential to the snow elf diet, guaranteeing every generation born underground would be blind from birth. Over thousands of years, enslaved and sightless, they devolved into the creatures you've been killing without a second thought. Gelebor doesn't call them Falmer, he calls them the Betrayed. Here's where it gets darker. His brother, Archcurate Verthur, runs the inner sanctum of the Chantry. The quest sends you through 5 way shrines in a ritual pilgrimage before you reach him, and when you do, the twist lands hard. Verthur is a vampire. He engineered the entire Tyranny of the Sun prophecy, a plan to blot out sunlight and allow vampires to walk freely, as revenge against Auriel for abandoning him after his infection. The holy order you've been making a pilgrimage through was corrupted from the inside by its own leader for centuries, and Gelebor never knew. Players who dig into Gelebor's data found something strange. He doesn't register under Detect Life, Detect Dead, or Aura Whisper. He appears as neither living nor dead, unique among every NPC in the game. What exactly he is after thousands of years of isolated vigil, the game never says. After the quest, he stays at the Chantry, keeping the way shrines open, waiting in case any snow elves who escape the betrayal find their way to him someday. None ever do. But as tragic as Gelebor is, at least his story has context. The next secret we're covering has almost none, and that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. The Ebony Warrior. At level 80, something happens that most players never experience, because most players never reach level 80. You walk into any major city, and a Redguard in full ebony armor approaches you. No quest marker, no warning. He just finds you, and what he says stops the conversation cold. I have done all that can be done. There is nothing left, no quests to be undertaken, no villains to be slain, no challenges to face. Except for you. He tells you to meet him at a camp called Last Vigil in the Velothi Mountains, and he walks away. That's it. No explanation, no context. Just a man who has finished everything and wants you to kill him. Here's the thing. The Ebony Warrior is not a quest about a boss fight. It's meta-commentary on the player. Specifically, the kind of player who reaches level 80 in a game with hundreds of hours of content. Someone who has cleared every dungeon, finished every faction, exhausted every storyline, and has nothing left. Bethesda built this encounter as a mirror. The Ebony Warrior is you, in a different playthrough, at the end of everything. His dying words are, "At last, Sovngarde." He's a Redguard. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife. Redguards don't go there. His wish is almost certainly impossible, and the game never resolves it. The combat specs alone tell you how seriously Bethesda took this encounter. He wields an ebony sword of the vampire. He can cast close wounds and conjure Storm Atronach. He uses unrelenting force and disarm, making him the only non-Nord NPC in the game capable of dragon shouts. He has the Reflect Blows perk, meaning melee power attacks can bounce back and kill you instantly. His armor gives 50% resistance to fire, frost, and shock. He's immune to paralysis, ice form, bend will, and the Wabbajack. He stands at 1.21 scale, taller than even an Altmer. His loot includes a human heart and a Daedra heart. Nobody explains what they're for. Nobody explains anything about him. The community has drawn comparisons to Umbra from Morrowind and Gainor from the Tribunal expansion, both infamous ebony-armored warriors with tragic backstories and punishing difficulty. The pattern is deliberate. Bethesda has been hiding these mirrors inside their games for decades. If you kill him before finishing the main quest, he doesn't appear in Sovngarde. The one place he wanted to reach, the one door that might have been open to him, closes. And the game doesn't say a word about it, but the ebony warrior at least gets to make his case in person. The next secret never announces itself at all. It's hiding in a mad emperor's subconscious, being served by a god who shouldn't exist yet. The Mind of Madness. In Solitude, a filthy beggar named Dervanin wanders the streets asking for help. Most players ignore him. He's dressed in rags, rambling about a master who went on vacation and won't come back. It sounds like nothing, but if you stop and listen, he hands you Pelagius's hip bone and a key to the sealed Pelagius wing of the Blue Palace, a wing nobody uses because everyone inside went insane. Walk in with the bone, and you get pulled into the mind of Emperor Pelagius III, Pelagius the Mad, where a surreal tea party is already in progress. Sitting at the head of the table, cheerful and completely unhinged, is Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. He gives you the Wabbajack and sends you to solve 3 trials inside Pelagius's fractured psyche: his paranoia, his night terrors, his anger. Standard Daedric quest, bizarre and funny. But then Sheogorath starts talking. He references the events of TES-4, Oblivion, with a precision that should not be possible. He mentions butterflies, blood, a fox, a severed head, and cheese. Every single reference maps exactly to events from Oblivion that only one person could have witnessed firsthand: the butterflies and the Shivering Isles. DLC. The fox, which is the alias of the Grey Fox from Oblivion's Thieves Guild. The severed head belonging to Mathieu Bellamont's mother in Oblivion's Dark Brotherhood. The cheese is a running joke from the Shivering Isles itself. Here's what that means. In the Shivering Isles expansion for Oblivion, the hero of Kvatch, Oblivion's player character, completes a questline that ends with them literally becoming Sheogorath, not serving him, not being blessed by, mantling him, taking on his identity, his power, his title. The Sheogorath sitting at that tea party in Skyrim 200 years later is the hero of Kvatch. He even says it directly, if you know what to listen for. He describes his title as something that gets passed down from himself to himself every few thousand years. He references Haskell, his chamberlain from the Shivering Isles, by name. The same voice actor, Wes Johnson, plays Sheogorath in both games. What this actually means is that 2 Elder Scrolls player characters are in the same room: the last Dragonborn and the hero of Kvatch, now a Daedric prince, sitting across a tea table inside a dead emperor's mind. And the game never explicitly says it. It just leaves the evidence there piece by piece for players who were paying attention 2 games ago. The entire quest is structured like an Alice in Wonderland fever dream. Mad tea party, surreal logic puzzles, identity confusion at every turn. It's not an accident. The joke and the lore are the same thing, but at least Sheogorath's identity is something you can piece together. The next secret hides its horror in plain sight, told entirely through journals most players walk right past: the Pale Lady. Frostmere Crypt is a Nordic ruin south of Dawnstar with no quest marker pointing to it. You find it by wandering, or you don't find it at all. Most players who do stumble across it sprint through, kill everything, grab the loot, and leave. They miss one of the best written stories in the entire game, told almost entirely through documents scattered across the floor. It starts outside. A bandit named Isa Blackthorn is being attacked, and if you save her, she tells you her friend went crazy and stole the boss's sword. That's all she gives you. Go inside, and the real story unfolds piece by piece through a journal called Kyr's Log. Kyr was running a failing bandit operation. 2 recruits showed up and saved it: Issa and a Khajiit named Rajir. Things turned around. Then, in week 15, a tunnel broke through into something nobody expected: a vast underground forest, completely sealed from the outside world. In the center of it, on a stone monument, sat a sword. Kyr took it as a trophy. Then Rajir started to deteriorate. His note to Issa is the moment the whole thing shifts from bandit drama to something genuinely unsettling. He writes that he sees her in every shadow, hears her voice on every breath of wind, in his dreams, in his ears, in his mind. He calls her the Pale Lady. He says they have to stop her. In the final chamber, Kyr is dying on the floor. Rajir is dead ahead of you, and standing in the middle of the underground forest is the Pale Lady herself, a named Wisp Mother sealed in that chamber since the Merethic era. Here's where it gets dark. An in-game book called Lost Legends reveals her ancient name, Omriel, a figure so dangerous that Ysgramor's own heirs spent decades hunting her before they managed to seal her away. The method was specific: a sword called the Pale Blade, placed on a pedestal in her chamber. That binding held for thousands of years, until Kyr walked in and took the sword as a trophy because he thought it looked nice. The player has 2 options: kill the Pale Lady outright, or return the pale blade to the pedestal and rebind her. The game doesn't tell you either of these things. You have to figure it out. And Aisa, if she survives the attack outside, doesn't just disappear. She shows up later at the Moorside Inn in Morthal, grieving, alive. The game tracked her the entire time and never mentioned it. There's no quest marker for any of this. No journal entry pointing you toward Morthal afterward. No achievement. Bethesda just wrote a complete horror story, hid it in an unmarked dungeon, and left it there for whoever happened to slow down long enough to read. But the Pale Lady is at least a mystery you can solve. The next secret is one the Dwemer themselves created, and what it says about them is far more disturbing than any ghost. Kelselmo's Stone. Kelselmo is the court wizard of Markarth, an Altmer scholar who has spent what he describes as 2 human lifetimes studying the Dwemer. His tower above Understone Keep is locked, guarded, and absolutely off-limits to anyone who isn't doing the Thieves Guild questline. Most players who do get inside are there for one reason: steal a rubbing of the stone tablet for the quest hard answers and get out. Copy it with charcoal and paper, hand it to Enthir and Karliah. Move on. Nobody stops to read what the tablet actually says. The stone is a Rosetta Stone for the Falmer language. Parallel columns of Dwemer script and Falmer script side by side, one of the only artifacts in the game that lets scholars translate between the two. Developer Kurt Kuhlman provided the official translation, and what it contains is one of the most chilling pieces of writing in the entire franchise. It is the Dwemer speaking directly to the snow elves they are about to enslave. The text describes what they called the welcoming chambers, spaces built in their depths for the snow elves' comfort and respite. It invites them to partake of the symbol of their bond, the fruit of the stones around them. It tells them that as their vision clouds, as the darkness sets in, they should not fear. They should know only the mercy of the Dwemer and the radiance of their affection, which unbinds their bones to the earth before and sets their final path to the music of their new eternity. Every word of that is a lie, dressed as kindness. The fruit of the stones around them is the toxic fungi. The vision clouding is the blinding. The mercy and the radiance of their affection is forced, permanent, generational disability inflicted on an entire civilization. The Dwemer didn't enslave the snow elves in a fit of cruelty or desperation. They planned it, wrote it down, translated it into Falmer so the snow elves could read their own destruction framed as a gift, and then handed it to them. This is the same species that built the automated cities, the tonal architecture, the brass gods still walking their ruins 1,000 years after their disappearance. They were brilliant, and they used that brilliance to write the most sophisticated propaganda in Tamriel's history, aimed at people they were about to make blind. The phrase 15 and 1 tones embedded in the text is a reference to Dwemer tonal magic, the vibrational systems that powered their entire civilization. It's there to make the text sound ceremonial and sacred. It's window dressing on a genocide. Kelselmo himself refuses to share his research with anyone. That research represents years of personal toil in some of the most dangerous Dwemer ruins in Skyrim. He tells you if you ask. He has spent a lifetime studying the people who did this, and he guards their secrets like treasure. The stone sits in his tower. Most players rob it without reading it, which means most players walked right past the single most damning document in the game and never knew it was there. But at least Kelselmo's horror is academic. The next secret is personal, and it asks a question the Stormcloaks and the Empire both pretend to have answered. What are Nords actually fighting for? Quine's sacred trials. There's no quest marker that leads you to Froki's shack. It sits in the mountains southeast of Ivarstead, a remote cabin with no road going to it and no reason to visit unless you already know it's there. Most players never find it. Those who do find an elderly hunter named Froki Wedded Blade, living alone with his grandson, Haming. Haming is a name you might recognize. He's the boy from the opening sequence of the game, standing in the street in Helgen while the dragon attacks. His parents died in that attack. He survived, and somehow, years into your playthrough, if you find this unmarked cabin in the mountains, he's just there, living quietly with his grandfather, mentioned in passing. No fanfare. But Froki is what this section is about, and Froki is furious. He has zero tolerance for the Imperial Divines, and he says so immediately. He calls them stolen idols, imposter gods sold by silver tongues. The goddess the Imperials call Kinnereth, the gentle deity of wind and air worshipped in temples across Skyrim, Froki calls a pale shadow of the truth. The real goddess is Kine, Shor's widow, sacred to any true Nord hunter, mother of men and beasts. Her veil is the storm. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Kinnereth is a sanitized Imperial export, a divine figure acceptable to the cosmopolitan pantheon the Empire assembled to hold its provinces together. Kine is older, wilder, specifically Norse in character, tied directly to Shor, the Nordic analog of the dead god Lorcan whose heart sat beneath Red Mountain. The Imperials didn't just conquer Skyrim politically. They replaced its gods with friendlier versions and called it the same religion. Froki's quest, Kine's Sacred Trials, sends you to hunt 7 guardian spirits across Skyrim, ghostly, translucent versions of native animals, each one a champion chosen by Kine herself. 3 lesser guardians first, a mud crab, a skeever, a wolf, then 3 greater ones, a bear, a mammoth, a saber cat. Each inhabits an area populated by normal versions of its species, wandering among them, distinguishable only because it glows. The final guardian is a troll inside Grey Winter Watch, near the ritual stone. The reward is Kind's Token, an amulet that reduces animal damage by 10% and increases bow damage by 5%. Mechanically modest, thematically enormous. Because what Froki is actually doing is passing down a religious tradition the Empire has spent centuries trying to absorb and neutralize. He's an old man in a mountain cabin with no followers, performing sacred rites to a goddess the temples have replaced, teaching them to a stranger because there's nobody else left to teach. The Stormcloak Rebellion gets framed in the game as a political dispute about a throne and a treaty. Kind's Sacred Trials frames it as something older and sadder, a culture watching its gods get renamed and its traditions go extinct one generation at a time. Inside Grey Winter Watch, alongside the Guardian Troll, you find Froki's bow. He left it there. He wanted it to be found by whoever was worthy of the trials. He never mentions it. He just left it. That's the whole quest. No dramatic finish, no villain, no twist, just an old man's faith and a bow he left in a cave for someone he'd never met. And if that quiet tragedy feels like a low-key way to end a section, wait until the final secret, because the last one involves a man who built a museum to the cult that nearly ended the world, and he has absolutely no idea what he's celebrating. Skyrim's 9 walled cities look like they survived the Dragon Crisis. They didn't. Every single one came out the other side carrying wounds that never fully heal, from political coups to serial killers to Daedric princes quietly feeding on entire populations. Today we're breaking down exactly what happened to every major city after the dust settled, starting with the one that was ground zero for all of it, Whiterun. Whiterun is the most visited city in the game, and on the surface, it looks like the one that made it out okay. Balanced Jarl, central location, legendary warrior guild guarding the gates. But by the time the main story wraps up, Whiterun has been through things it will never fully recover from. Start with Jarl Balgruuf. His entire identity is neutrality. He famously refuses to pick a side in the Civil War, right up until Ulfric forces his hand with an ultimatum. At that point, the city gets dragged into it regardless, and the Battle of Whiterun causes real, lasting damage. Stormcloak catapults bombard the city, homes in the Plains District are destroyed, and the casualties start before the main assault even reaches the gates. If the Stormcloaks win, Balgruuf is deposed entirely. The elderly Vignar Greymane takes the throne, and Balgruuf, his children, and his housecarl Irileth are all shipped off to a basement room in Solitude's Blue Palace. His exit is, "This isn't over, you old fool," and then it just is. He never gets it back. But the Civil War isn't even Whiterun's darkest problem. That belongs to the Companions. Their entire inner council are secretly werewolves, the result of a deal made with the Glenmoril witches generations ago that their founding harbinger didn't fully understand. Every Circle member who has died since then had their soul dragged into Hircine's hunting grounds instead of Sovngarde, the great Nord warrior afterlife, permanently off the table because of a contract signed before they were born. And then there's the thing in Dragon's Reach's basement. Balgruuf's youngest son, Nelkir, is being psychically corrupted by Mephala through the Ebony Blade. Balgruuf actually tried to melt the blade in the Skyforge and the coals cooled around it. Under Mephala's influence, Nelkir starts leaking family secrets, including the fact that he doesn't share a mother with his siblings. The royal family's worst secret, spilled by a child who barely understands what he's saying. Dragon's Reach itself fulfills a purpose. Thousands of years in the making when Odahviing is trapped in its great porch, the same structure built to hold the dragon Numinex back in the First Era. The palace was literally designed for this moment. The skull above the Jarl's throne wasn't decoration. It was a warning about what the room could do. For all its warm lighting and open plains, Whiterun is not okay. It just hides it better than most, but at least it still has most of its walls. Solitude is about to find out what happens when even that isn't guaranteed. Solitude. The first thing Solitude shows you is an execution. A guard named Rogvir walks to the headsman's block for opening the city gates so Ulfric could leave after killing High King Torygg. His last words are that there was no murder, that Ulfric challenged Torygg in fair combat according to Nord tradition, and that he goes to Sovngarde with no regrets. Then the axe falls. He never appears in Sovngarde. Make of that what you will. Solitude is Skyrim's wealthiest city, the seat of imperial power in the province, home to the Bard's College, the East Empire Company, and the only temple that worships all 8 divines under a single roof. There's even an empty alcove where the Shrine of Talos used to stand before the White Gold Concordat forced its removal. The whole city is a picture of imperial stability, but here's where it gets weird. The court wizard who has served Solitude for decades, Sybil Stentor, is a vampire. there. She's been one long enough that nobody alive remembers when she wasn't. The cook Odar notes he's never once seen her eat. Castle Dour's dungeons sit directly below the palace, and there are strong implications she's been quietly feeding on prisoners there for years. Nobody has said anything. Nobody will. Jarl Elisif the Fair is a young widow still grieving Torrig, and her steward Falk Firebeard is doing most of the actual governing while she finds her footing. Cut dialogue reveals she doesn't actually hate Ulfric the way everyone expects her to. She's just lost. The Wolf Queen Potema, one of Tamriel's most dangerous necromancers in history, and Solitude's former ruler, had her spirit nearly resurrected by a necromancer cult in Wolfskull Cave during all of this. The player eventually has to destroy what's left of her in the Solitude catacombs. The city was almost overrun by an undead army while its Jarl was too grief-stricken to notice. Then the Dark Brotherhood kills the Emperor. Not in Solitude, technically, but it starts there, with his cousin Vittoria Vici assassinated at her own wedding in full view of half the city. If the Stormcloaks take Solitude, Ulfric lets Elisif keep her title as long as she cooperates. The Shrine of Talos gets restored. General Tullius gets executed. Legate Ricca refuses to surrender and dies for it. The city survives, but it has a vampire in the court, a Daedric mad emperor in its sealed west wing, and a succession crisis nobody has resolved. And somehow that's not even the most politically complicated city on this list. Windhelm. Windhelm is the oldest continuously inhabited human settlement in all of Tamriel. Isgramor founded it after his son Ingol died crossing from Atmora, built it as a monument to mankind's dominion over Skyrim, and forced captured snow elves to construct it. According to the records, roughly as many elves died building Windhelm as were killed by Isgramor's crew before they ever arrived. The city's origin is a war crime disguised as a monument. 4,000 years later, Windhelm is still doing that. The first thing you see entering the city is two Nord men cornering a Dunmer woman in the street, calling her a stain on the city, telling her she isn't wanted. The Dark Elves in Windhelm live in the Grey Quarter, a blighted ghetto formerly called the Snow Quarter before someone decided to rename it after their skin color. Argonians aren't even allowed inside the walls by Ulfric's direct order. They live in a dock settlement outside the city, paid a fraction of what Nord workers earn for the same labor. This is the Stormcloak capital, the movement fighting for Nord freedom. Here's the thing about Ulfric that nobody talks about. The Thalmor have a dossier on him, not because he's their agent, but because his rebellion is useful to them. The document explicitly states the Stormcloak uprising keeps the Empire destabilized and prevents it from properly rearming for a second Great War. Ulfric isn't a Thalmor puppet, but he is, functionally, their most valuable asset. He just doesn't know it. And then there's blood on the ice. While all of this is happening politically, a serial killer named Calixto Corium has been murdering women across Windhelm for years. He runs a curiosity shop as cover. His journals detail the specific body parts he's collecting to resurrect his dead sister using ancient necromantic flesh rituals. He even sells tours of the shop. He points to what he claims is Isgramor's soup spoon and jokes that it looks more like a fork. The man is out here harvesting corpses and running a guided museum experience. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Ulfric and Galmar Stonefist are killed in the Palace of the Kings. Their bodies stay there permanently. Brunwulf Free Winter takes over as Jarl, a man who genuinely wants to help the Dunmer and Argonians. But even he admits the city's hatred runs too deep to fix quickly. The Argonians stay outside. Progress is slow when the prejudice is structural. Windhelm is a city that has been treating the people inside it as lesser for 4,000 years. A new Jarl doesn't change that overnight, but at least Windhelm's problems are out in the open. Markarth buries everything, and what's underneath is worse. Markarth. The first time you walk into Markarth, a man gets stabbed in the marketplace. A forsworn agent named Wayland drives a blade into a woman in broad daylight, while guards stand 20 feet away. As he dies, a guard delivers what has to be the single most ironic line in the entire game: safest city in the Reach. Markarth is built inside the ruins of a Dwemer stronghold called Nchuan Zel, carved directly into the mountain. The Dwemer vanished around the First Era and the Reachmen moved in. Then, the Nords pushed the Reachmen out. Then, during the Great War, when the Imperial legions withdrew, the Reachmen took it back for 2 years under their king Madanak. And then Ulfric Stormcloak's militia retook it with the Thu'um, threw Reachmen off the walls, and executed every official even after they surrendered. Women were tortured for information. People who hadn't even fought were killed, if they were deemed old enough to hold a sword. That was 25 years before the events of the game. The Forsworn have been bleeding Markarth's roads ever since. But here's where it gets complicated. The Silverblood family, Markarth's wealthiest clan, secretly controls the Forsworn through Madanach, who is still alive in Sidnamine, the most feared prison in Skyrim, where prisoners mine silver around the clock and eat only when quotas are met, is run by a private family as a labor operation. The Jarl knows none of this. The guards are on the Silverblood payroll. The Forsworn threat that justifies the prison's existence is being deliberately maintained by the same people profiting from it. When you start pulling on this thread, a corrupt guard frames you and throws you inside. Zero bounty, zero trial. And then there's everything else Markarth is hiding. A Molag Bal shrine in an abandoned house where the Daedric Prince of Domination makes you beat a priest to death repeatedly until he breaks. A cannibal cult operating inside the city walls, with members who include a market merchant, a dog seller, and a shopkeeper who may or may not have eaten her husband. The Thalmor agent Ondalemar runs his Talos enforcement operation directly out of the Jarl's keep, while the Jarl's own steward is secretly a Talos worshipper who can be blackmailed into feeding military intelligence to the Civil War questline. If the Stormcloaks win, Thongvor Silverblood becomes Jarl. The family that already owned the prison, the guards, and half the city now has the throne too. It is the single most complete consolidation of corrupt power in any city in the game. Markarth doesn't have a problem. Markarth is the problem, all the way down. Riften at least has the decency to admit what it is. Riften doesn't pretend to be something it isn't. The moment you walk through the gate, a man tries to shake you down for an entry fee that doesn't exist. A guard standing 10 feet away watches it happen and says nothing. That's the whole city in one interaction. Riften was once a legitimate trading hub between Skyrim and Morrowind. Then a tyrant Jarl named Hosgun Crossed Daggers ran it into the ground for 30 years. The city revolted, someone burned his castle down, and the fire took the entire city with it. It was rebuilt from scratch. And somehow what grew back was worse. The real ruler of Riften is Maven Blackbriar. She doesn't hold the title of Jarl, but she doesn't need to. She says it herself, openly, to anyone who asks. Nothing gets done without her approval. She has the Jarl's ear, the guards in her pocket, the Thieves Guild on retainer, and a direct line to the Dark Brotherhood for when she needs something more permanent handled. In the locked basement of her manor sits a Black Sacrament setup, a skeleton, a human heart, Nightshade, and a letter to the Brotherhood complaining about how long a contract is taking. Maven Blackbriar is running a city, a criminal empire, and a murder operation simultaneously, and the Jarl has no idea. Jarl Layla Lawgiver genuinely believes Maven is helping keep the Thieves Guild in check. That quote is real. She said it. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Maven becomes the official Jarl of Riften. The person who was already running everything gets the title to match. Her son becomes steward. Her enforcer becomes Housecarl. And here's the detail that makes it perfect. If the Stormcloaks later reclaim Riften, Maven is the only deposed Jarl in the entire game who doesn't get exiled. Every other displaced Jarl gets shipped off to a palace basement. Maven just goes back to her manor and continues exactly as before. She is untouchable, regardless of who wins the war. Beneath the city, through the Ratway sewer network, sits the Thieves Guild, or what's left of it. The guild has been in decline for 25 years because Guildmaster Mercer Fry murdered his predecessor, stole a divine artifact called the Skeleton Key from the goddess Nocturnal's shrine, and used it to drain the guild's luck while embezzling the treasury. The decline wasn't bad management. It was a literal curse. Nocturnal withdrew her favor the moment the key left the Twilight Sepulchre, and every job the guild ran afterward went slightly, consistently wrong for over 2 decades. The woman who knew the truth, Karliah, spent those same 25 years in exile after Mercer framed her for the murder. She waited, she gathered evidence, and then the Dragonborn walked into the Ratway. Down the canal from all of this sits Honor Hall Orphanage, run by a woman named Grelid the Kind. Her nickname is not ironic by accident. She denies the children basic comfort, threatens them regularly, and has explicitly revoked their right to be adopted. Killing her carries no bounty. The children celebrate. Riften runs on corruption so deep it has its own ecosystem. Maven at the top, the Thieves Guild underneath, the guards bought and paid for, and a Jarl in the middle who thinks she's in charge. At least Winterhold lost its corruption to the sea. Most of it. Anyway, Winterhold. Every other city on this list is dealing with the consequences of something people did. Winterhold is dealing with the consequences of something nobody can fully explain. In its prime, time, Winterhold was one of Skyrim's greatest cities. Rivals with Solitude for political influence, home to a thriving port, enriched by Dunmer refugee scholars who brought entire rescued libraries with them when they fled Morrowind. Then in 4E 122, violent storms hit the northern coast for nearly a year, and most of the city just fell into the Sea of Ghosts. Entire districts, the Jarl's family, gone. The population never recovered. But here's what nobody has a clean answer for. The College of Winterhold, sitting on its rocky promontory above the city, was almost completely untouched. The same storms that swallowed the rest of Winterhold left the college standing without serious damage. The Archmage at the time said it was just the protective enchantments on the building. The townspeople said that was exactly what a guilty mage would say. 4 competing theories exist, and none of them are fully satisfying. The college officially blames Red Mountain's eruption. The problem is Red Mountain erupted in 4E5, which is 117 years before the collapse. The timeline doesn't hold. Jarl Courier insists the college caused it directly, though he has zero evidence. A third theory points to Thalmor sabotage, given their documented history of engineering large-scale catastrophes to weaken their enemies. The fourth connects to the Eye of Magnus, which the research outline flags as speculative. The actual answer is that nobody knows, and the game never tells you. What's left of Winterhold by 4E201 is barely a city at all. A longhouse, an inn, a general store, and the college. There is no blacksmith, no alchemist, no jail either. Criminals get sent to a cave called the Chill, guarded by 4 frost Atronachs. It snows constantly. The Clear Skies shout doesn't work there. It is the only hold in Skyrim where you cannot buy or build a home through any means in the base game or either DLC. The college itself is rotting from the inside during all of this. A Thalmor agent named Encano is embedded in the faculty. The Archmage ends up dead. And beneath the building, a former student named the Augur of Dunlane exists as a formless ball of energy after a magical experiment destroyed his body. He still answers questions. The college just quietly decided to keep him down there. If the Imperials win the Civil War, Courier is replaced by Kraldar, who actually wants to repair the relationship with the college. It is the most optimistic political outcome for any city in Skyrim. The townspeople's resentment barely shifts. Winterhold lost most of itself to the sea over 100 years ago and is still waiting for an explanation. It is probably still waiting. Dawnstar's problems are fresher, and somehow more exhausting. Dawnstar, every single person in Dawnstar is having nightmares. Not metaphorically. Literally every citizen, every guard, every miner wakes up shaking. The Daedric prince, Vermina, has been using an artifact called the Skull of Corruption inside Nightcaller Temple, on the clifftop above town, to drain people's memories while they sleep. Nobody in the city knows why it's happening. They just know they can't rest. The priest tasked with stopping it is a Dunmer named Erendur, and his connection to the temple is not accidental. He used to be one of Vermina's cultists. He was recruited as a child, spent years in her service, and was personally responsible for releasing the miasma, a sleep gas that put the entire temple into suspended animation when Orcish raiders attacked. He released it, then ran, left every one of his brothers behind, spent years afterward becoming a priest of Mara out of guilt. The quest takes you inside his past. You drink a potion that lets you experience the temple's history through his eyes. And at the end of it, Vermina speaks directly into the Dragonborn's mind, trying to manipulate you into killing Erendur at the moment he becomes most vulnerable. The prince literally invades the player's head to protect her artifact. That's how much the Skull of Corruption matters to her. Once that's resolved, Dawnstar still has the mythic Dawn Museum. An Imperial citizen named Silas Vesuvius runs it out of his house, dedicated to the cult that murdered Emperor Uriel Septim VII and triggered the Oblivion Crisis 200 years ago. Silas is a direct descendant of one of the assassins. His displays include robes dyed with sacrificial blood and pages from the Mysterium Xarxes. His court wizard confronts him about it. He does not care. His family did this. He's proud of it. The quest ends at Mehrunes Dagon's shrine, where the prince demands Silas die to reforge his razor. If you spare him, Silas has a rare moment of self-reflection. He admits the whole adventure scared him straight, a mythic Dawn descendant, humbled by his own Daedric quest. It's almost touching. Jarl Skald the Elder has been running the Pale for over 35 years, and is nearly universally despised. His own court wizard and housecarl, both great war veterans, openly disagree with his Stormcloak politics. The mine owner calls him a brat. If the Imperials win, retired legate Brina Marilis replaces him, which locals treat as an enormous relief. The Dark Brotherhood relocates to the Dawnstar Sanctuary after the Falkreath base is destroyed. Nazir, Babette, and the Night Mother's coffin end up here. The last surviving Assassin's Guild in Tamriel makes its final home in a city where everyone has been awake for days. too afraid to close their eyes. Nobody in Dawnstar is sleeping well. They never really were. Falkreath has a different relationship with death. It just made peace with it a long time ago. Falkreath's graveyard is larger than the town itself. That's not a figure of speech. The cemetery physically occupies more space than the living settlement surrounding it. The loading screen explains it plainly. So many battles were fought here over the centuries that graves were dug, monuments were raised, and eventually a town grew up around all of it. The dead were there first. The living just moved in. Every business reflects this. The inn is called Dead Man's Drink. The alchemy shop is Grave Concoctions. The general store is Grey Pine Goods. The farm is Corpselight Farm. Falkreath didn't stumble into its identity. It leaned in completely. When you arrive, a funeral is already underway for a child named Lavinia, killed by a werewolf named Sinding who stole the ring of Hircine, hoping it would help him control his transformations. Hircine cursed the ring specifically because he stole it, and during a random shift, Sinding killed the girl. The quest that follows takes you to Bloated Man's Grotto, where you either kill Sinding for Hircine or spare him, becoming prey in a divine hunt yourself. A Daedric prince using a grieving town's tragedy as a setup for sport. But here's where it gets weird. The second Daedric quest also originates in Falkreath, through a blacksmith named Lod who asks you to find a stray dog on the road. The dog is Barbas, the supernatural hound companion of Clavicus Vile. 2 Daedric quests, one tiny town built on a graveyard. That is a concentration of Daedric activity that rivals cities 3 times its size. Jarl Siggeir is young, lazy, and almost certainly corrupt. His very first request is to eliminate a bandit leader, which is suspicious, given he also wants a specific bottle of Blackbriar Reserve as payment, suggesting connections that go in directions a Jarl's shouldn't. His uncle Dengir was the previous Jarl before the Imperials had him removed, and Dengir has never stopped being furious about it. He's convinced there are spies everywhere. He's also correct that his own ancestor Vigar is a vampire living in a nearby cave, which is not nothing. The Altmer priest of Arkay, Runil, carries a secret that reframes his entire presence in the most death-saturated town in Skyrim. He was a Thalmor battle mage in the Great War. He killed people with magic. His journal records dreams about the return of dragons. He is hiding from the Thalmor in a graveyard, serving the god of death, asking the divines to forgive him for the bodies he put in the ground. There is no more fitting penance in all of Skyrim. Just west of town sits the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary, the last refuge of the last Assassin's Guild in Tamriel, hidden behind a skull-shaped door with a bloody handprint and a heartbeat you can hear from outside. The Penitus Oculatus destroys it during the questline. Festus Crex is found pinned to a tree. Falkreath is where things come to end. Guilds, soldiers, guilty men trying to outrun what they've done. Morthal is different. The things in Morthal don't end. They just wait. Morthal is the capital of Hjalmarch, one of Skyrim's poorest holds, and it looks exactly like that. Fog so thick you can't see across the marshes. Twisted dead trees, mud paths between a handful of buildings. The city doesn't have walls so much as it has a general understanding that nobody wants to come here. Jarl Idgrid Ravencrone governs through visions. She believes they come from the divines. The official game guide confirms she and her daughter are unconsciously channeling magicka to produce them, which means they are not divine in origin, and she has no idea. Her son Jorik has the same ability, and it's tearing him apart. Her housecarl Gorm, the man sworn to protect her, is secretly writing letters to Captain Aldous in Solitude exploring the possibility of having her removed from power. Her own household is working against her, and yet she is, genuinely, one of the most perceptive Jarls in Skyrim. When you report strange activity in town, she doesn't panic or dismiss it. She just says the spirit world is strong in this place, and moves on. She's right, by the way. There is a burned house on the edge of town. Everyone knows about it. A man named Hrogar lost his wife and daughter in the fire, and within days he moved in with a woman named Alva. The townspeople think he said it himself. They are wrong about who did it, but not about what happened. Here's the truth. Alva is a vampire, sent to Morthal by a master vampire named Movarth Pekin with a specific objective: seduce the guards one by one, turn them into thralls, then convert the entire town into a blood farm. She turned a woman named Leolette into a vampire, and ordered her to burn Hrogar's house with his family inside to remove an obstacle. His wife and daughter died to protect a feeding operation. The daughter, Helgi, is still there. She died in the fire and exists as a ghost, and she wants to play hide and seek. She leads you to her grave on the hillside. At night, Leolette attacks there. A vampire who couldn't bring herself to fully leave the child she was ordered to kill. There are implications she wanted to turn Helgi instead. Keep her. A dead woman who burned a little girl now haunts her grave, unable to let go. Movarth himself has a history that makes the whole thing darker. He was one of the most successful vampire hunters in Tamriel, a Fighters Guild specialist who studied them so obsessively and thoroughly that he eventually became one. The hunter became the thing he hunted. He then spent decades building toward a plan to enslave an entire town, and when the townspeople finally work up the nerve to march on his lair, they lose their courage at the entrance and refuse to go inside, except for one man, Thonir, whose wife, Leolette, was turned. He goes in. Morthal also has Falion, the only person in all of Skyrim who can cure vampirism. He sneaks out to a summoning circle in the marshes between 1 and 5 in the morning every night, and the townspeople whisper about what he's doing out there. His young ward has bad dreams about him going away and making monsters. This is a city where a vampire nearly enslaved the whole population, where a ghost child plays games in the fog, where the Jarl rules by visions she doesn't understand, and where the one man who can cure the undead goes out alone into the dark every single night. Morthal survived everything. It just didn't come out clean, and neither did any of these cities. Every single one of them, from Whiterun to Morthal, came through the Dragon Crisis carrying something they didn't have before. A deposed Jarl in a basement, a vampire in the court, a serial killer's legacy, a graveyard that keeps getting bigger. Skyrim saved itself from Alduin. It just never quite saved itself from everything else. Skyrim accidentally became a psychological experiment about loyalty. Every faction follows the same pattern. Join as a nobody, discover the leader's fatal secret, watch them die, inherit everything. Yet somehow 8 different groups made this formula work. That's why today I'm breaking down every single major faction in Skyrim, what they actually do, what happens if you join them versus ignore them completely, and the dark secrets that get people killed. Starting with the warriors who made a deal with a Daedric prince and can't escape it. The companions. The companions are either Skyrim's most honorable warriors or its most cursed, depending on whether you ask them or their dead victims. Based in Jorrvaskr, the oldest building in Whiterun, they're mercenaries taking contracts for gold and glory. No formal leader, no political allegiances, just steel and coin. Sounds simple, but here's where it gets complicated. The inner circle, called the Circle, are all werewolves, and I can prove it. Centuries ago, Harbinger Terfig made a pact with the Glenmoril witches for the beast blood from Hircine, the Daedric prince of the Hunt. The Circle thought it was temporary power. They were wrong. Upon death, every werewolf's soul belongs to Hircine forever in his hunting grounds. 0 exceptions. That means every companion who carries lycanthropy can never reach Sovngarde. Their Nordic afterlife is gone. Current Harbinger Kodlak. Whitemane knows this. His journal contains prophetic dreams about curing the beast blood before he dies. He's desperate, and he should be, because during the quest Blood's Honor, the Silver Hand assassinates him while you're away on a mission. You return to find his corpse. The man who wanted salvation more than anyone dies, cursed. If you complete the companion's questline before finishing the main story, Kodlak's cured spirit actually appears in Sovngarde during the finale, proving the cure worked posthumously. The questline forces you to become a werewolf. Mandatory, Alla the Huntress makes you drink her blood. You lose the well-rested sleep bonus permanently, unless you cure yourself later at Ysgramor's tomb using witch heads from the Glenmoril Coven. 5 witches, total. 1 cures Kodlak's spirit, 1 for yourself, 1 each for twin brothers Vilkas and Farkas. The 5th goes unused because Alla refuses the cure. She embraces the beast. But if you think warriors cursed by a divine contract is dark, wait until you hear about the mages who accidentally created a sentient orb of pure magical energy that can't be turned off. The College of Winterhold. The College of Winterhold is where forbidden knowledge has a body count, a fortress perched on a crumbling cliff on Skyrim's northeast coast. It's the only institution for magical study in the province. The city blames the college for the great collapse of 4E122, when a catastrophic storm destroyed most of Winterhold. The college blames the Red Mountain eruption. Nobody has evidence for either theory, but the mutual hatred is real. Here's the thing. You need exactly 0 magical ability to become Archmage. Feralda at the Bridge Gate asks you to cast a random spell to enter. If you don't know it, she sells it for 30 gold. A pure warrior in full plate armor can lead the mages. This is both hilarious and a common criticism players have had for over a decade. The college's dark secret isn't just one thing, it's 3. First, Archmage Savos Aran led 5 friends into Labyrinthian as a student decades ago. They all died. He buried this trauma and never spoke of it. Second, a former student named the Augur of Dunlane experimented with magic until he transformed himself into a disembodied ball of energy trapped in the midden beneath the college. He's literally a sentient orb that can't die, can't leave, and receives the same unskippable dialogue treatment as Daedric princes. Third, Thalmor agent Ancano lurks inside the college as an advisor, secretly spying and seeking power. The questline revolves around the Eye of Magnus, an artifact so dangerous that reality itself breaks when it activates. You discover it buried under Sarthal during excavation. Ancano seizes control of it, causes a massive explosion that kills Savos Aran, and becomes the final boss. But here's where it gets weird. When you defeat Ancano, the Psijic Order teleports into the college, declares the world is not ready for the Eye, and removes it from Tamriel entirely. The oldest and most powerful mages in existence had to personally intervene. Mirabelle Irvine, the backbone of the college and its master wizard, Blizzard, dies off-screen while you're exploring Labyrinthian. Her body is never found. The game just tells you she's dead when you return. 2 leaders dead, 1 artifact too dangerous to exist, and you become Archmage, having cast maybe 6 spells total. Tolfdir's first lesson on wards foreshadows everything. He teaches you a basic ward spell in the courtyard. Later, when Ancano uses a paralysis attack during the final battle, that exact ward blocks it. The absent-minded professor accidentally taught you the only defense that matters. But the college has nothing on the faction whose leader spent 25 years embezzling from his own guild while holding a Daedric artifact that makes him nearly unstoppable. The Thieves Guild. The Thieves Guild operates from the Ragged Flagon, a tavern in the Ratway sewers beneath Riften. Professional thieves with a code, no killing while thieving unless pre-authorized, no robbing each other, no robbing the poor. But the guild has been in decline for decades, and nobody knows why. Jobs fail, members die, luck runs out. The answer is betrayal. Guildmaster Mercer Fry secretly murdered the previous guildmaster, Gallus Desidenius, 25 years ago. He framed Gallus's lover, Carlia, for the crime, stole the skeleton key from the Twilight Sepulchre, and has been embezzling from the guild vault ever since. The skeleton key isn't just an unbreakable lockpick. It unlocks your potential, granting superhuman abilities. Mercer uses it to become nearly invincible. But here's the real problem. The skeleton key belongs to Nocturnal, Daedric Prince of Night and Darkness. Its theft severed the guild's covenant with her. That supernatural luck that separated professional thieves from common bandits disappeared the moment Mercer took it. The guild has been dying for 25 years because their own leader destroyed them. The betrayal reveal happens at Snowvale Sanctum. You're working with Mercer to track down Carlia. You find her. She tries to warn you. Mercer stabs you in the back and leaves you to die. One of the biggest betrayal moments in the game. Carlia saves you with a paralysis antidote and produces Gallus's journal, written in Falmer language, proving Mercer's guilt. The questline transforms you into a Nightingale, Nocturnal's elite agents, who serve her even in death as ghostly sentinels. You infiltrate Mercer's house and discover he emptied the entire guild vault. You track him to the Dwemer ruin Erkenthand, where he's stealing the eyes of the Falmer, 2 massive gems worth a fortune. You kill him, you recover the skeleton key, and then the game asks you to return it. Many players refuse. The skeleton key functions as an unbreakable lockpick while you hold it. Infinite lockpicking with 0 risk. The quest Darkness Returns sits in your journal forever. Returning it unlocks Nightingale powers and restores the guild's luck, but you lose the key. It's a genuine trade-off. The restoration system requires radiant jobs. Complete 5 jobs in a specific hold. Unlock a special reputation quest for that city. 4 total across Whiterun, Windhelm, Markarth, and Solitude. Each completion adds merchants to the Ragged Flagon, improves the cistern visually, and increases fence gold capacity. Full restoration makes you guild master. Maven Blackbriar serves as the guild's patron, controlling Riften through corruption. She's connected to the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Thalmor. If the Imperials win the Civil War, she becomes Jarl. Her influence is permanent, regardless of outcome. There's no option to destroy the Thieves Guild. All key members are marked essential. But if you think a leader who betrayed everyone is dark, wait until you hear about the assassins whose leader performs the Black Sacrament on her own burned body and begs you to kill her. The Dark Brotherhood. The Dark Brotherhood worships Sithis, the Void itself, and is led spiritually by the Night Mother, a preserved corpse believed to be Sithis' mortal wife, who murdered her own children as offerings. By 4E201, the Brotherhood is nearly extinct. Sanctuaries across Tamriel have fallen. Only the Falkreath Sanctuary survives, led by Astrid, a Nord who abandoned the traditional 5 tenets and the old ways. The questline begins when you kill Grelad the Kind for a child named Aventus Aretino performing the Black Sacrament. Astrid kidnaps you, brings you to an abandoned shack, and tells you to kill one of 3 hostages to join. You choose, you kill, you enter the sanctuary. The door riddle asks, what is the music of life? The answer is silence. My brother. Everything seems normal until you hide inside the Night Mother's coffin during whispers in the dark. She speaks to you telepathically. She names you Listener, the position that receives contracts directly from Sithis through her corpse. Astrid is furious. She wanted that title. She built this sanctuary. You're the outsider. The main contract comes from Amaund Modieri, an Elder Council member. The target, Emperor Titus Mede II. You assassinate Vittoria Vici at her wedding in Solitude. You can drop a gargoyle on her. You kill Gaius Maro and plant evidence. You pursue the mad jester Cicero to Dawnstar Sanctuary and choose whether to spare or kill him. You steal the identity of the gourmet, an orc chef named Balagog Gro Nolob. You impersonate him at the Emperor's castle. You poison his meal with Jaren Root, the deadliest poison ingredient in the game. Only one plant exists in Skyrim. The Emperor dies, but it's a decoy. Commander Maro reveals Astrid betrayed the Brotherhood to the Penitus Oculatus. You return to find the sanctuary burning. Nazir and Babette, a 300-year-old vampire child, survive. Astrid performed the Black Sacrament on herself. She used her own burned body as the effigy. She's lying in a pool of blood, surrounded by candles, and begs you to kill her with the Blade of Woe as her contract. One of the most dramatically powerful moments in the entire game. You aboard the Emperor's ship, the Cateria. You find the real Emperor Titus Mede II. He's not hostile. He expected you. His speech is legendary. And once more, I prove Commander Marrow the fool. You and I have a date with destiny. But so it is with assassins and emperors. He asks, as a dying wish, that you kill Modieri for betraying him. You collect 20,000 gold. You can restore the Dawnstar Sanctuary for 19,000 gold with full upgrades, including a torture chamber. There's an alternative. Kill Astrid in the abandoned shack instead of a hostage. Report to guards. Assault the Falkreath Sanctuary and kill everyone. Reward 3,000 gold. You lose Shadowmere, the demonic horse. You lose 20,000 gold. You lose the spectral assassin power that summons Lucian Lechance's ghost from oblivion. You lose Windseer, a unique scimitar on the Cateria with 100% stagger chance on every bash. Cicero is the standout character. His 5 journals chronicle 8 years of isolation as the Brotherhood collapsed around him, documenting his descent from disciplined assassin into madness. If you spare him, he becomes a follower. Lucian Lechance's spectral form, if summoned during the quest, advises against killing Cicero. But the Dark Brotherhood's body count has nothing on the faction war where both sides believe they're saving Skyrim while accidentally serving the enemy that wants them both dead. The Imperial Legion. The Imperial Legion operates from Castle Dour in solitude with a single mission: crush the Stormcloak Rebellion and maintain Imperial control over Skyrim. The Empire signed the White Gold Concordat after the Great War, banning Talos worship to end hostilities with the Aldmeri Dominion. This treaty is the root cause of the Civil War. General Tullius leads the Legion. He's a military governor from Cyrodiil, initially dismissive of Nordic culture, but learns respect as the war progresses. He despises the Thalmor. They almost make him want to throw in with the Stormcloaks. He believes the rebellion is a distraction from the real enemy. His second-in-command is Legate Rika, a Nord officer who fought alongside Ulfric and Galmar in the Great War. They were once friends. Here's the secret nobody talks about. Rika secretly worships Talos despite enforcing the ban. After killing Ulfric in an Imperial victory, she whispers, "Talos be with you," over his corpse. Tullius almost catches it. If the Stormcloaks attack Solitude and she dies, her last words are, "Talos preserve us." The questline starts at Castle Dour. Clear Fort Kragstad of bandits. Swear the Imperial oath. Retrieve the Jagged Crown from Korvanjund, an ancient Nordic ruin. This is the last chance to switch sides. You can deliver the crown to Ulfric instead of Tullius. Deliver Tullius's message to Jarl Balgruuf, who sides with the Empire. Defend Whiterun from the Stormcloak siege in the Battle for Whiterun. Reunification of Skyrim is the Umbrella quest, containing multiple fort battles: Fort Dunstad, Fort Greenwall, Fort Castav, Fort Amal. Intelligence operations include a false front and compelling tribute. The questline culminates in the Battle for Windhelm, final assault on Ulfric's stronghold. You storm the Palace of the Kings. Ulfric requests the Dragonborn kill him personally. It will make for a better song. You can execute him, or let Tullius do it. Imperial victory changes 4 Jarls. Brunwulf Freewinter replaces Ulfric in Eastmarch. Brina Marilis replaces Skald in the Pale. Maven Blackbriar replaces Lila in the Rift. Krulder replaces Courier in Winterhold. Deposed Jarls are exiled to Windhelm's Palace of the Kings. The arguments for the Empire focus on unity. Humanity's best chance against the Thalmor requires a united front. The ban was strategic compromise, not genuine belief. Even Rika worships Talos. Ulfric unknowingly serves Thalmor interests by weakening the Empire. Hammerfell barely survived fighting the Thalmor alone after the Empire abandoned the province. But here's where it gets complicated. The Thalmor dossier on Ulfric, found in the Thalmor embassy during diplomatic immunity, reveals Ulfric's status as an asset, uncooperative, dormant. The Thalmor want the war to continue indefinitely. They consider both an Imperial victory and a Stormcloak victory undesirable. The ideal scenario for the Thalmor is a forever war that bleeds both sides. Ulfric doesn't know he was manipulated. The game never lets you show him the dossier. The Imperial Legion believes they're saving Skyrim from itself, but the Stormcloaks believe they're saving Skyrim from foreign control. The Stormcloaks operate from the Palace of the Kings in Windhelm. Their purpose: end Imperial rule, restore Talos worship, establish Skyrim's independence. Led by Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, a man who studied with the Greybeards for nearly 10 years before leaving to fight in the Great War. The rebellion's origin is the Markarth incident. During the Great War, Reachman seized Markarth. After the war ended, Ulfric retook the city using the Thu'um with a promise of free Talos worship in return. The Thalmor discovered the agreement and demanded enforcement of the Concordat. The Empire arrested Ulfric. This incident birthed both the Stormcloak Rebellion and the Forsworn insurgency. Ulfric challenged High King Torrig to a duel. He shouted Torrig to the ground with the Thu'um and killed him with his sword. Imperials call it murder. Stormcloaks call it legitimate Nordic tradition. The entire civil war hinges on whether using the voice in single combat is honorable or a war crime. His general is Galmar Stone Fist, who fought alongside Ulfric and Rika in the Great War. If Rika dies in battle, Galmar says sadly, always was a stubborn woman. His brother Rolf Stone Fist harasses Dunmer refugees in Windhelm streets, calling them greyskins, and worse. Here's the racial problem nobody talks about. Dunmer refugees are confined to the Grey Quarter slum. Argonians are banned from living inside the city by Ulfric's decree. The in-game book Scourge of the Grey Quarter is openly racist propaganda. When confronted about Grey Quarter conditions, Ulfric dismisses it. Blasted Dark Elves. The Stormcloaks fight for freedom, but not everyone's freedom. The questline mirrors the Imperial path. Kill an ice wraith near Serpentstone Isle, swear the Stormcloak oath. Retrieve the Jagged Crown from Corvinjund. Deliver Ulfric's axe to Balgruf. Returning the axe is a declaration of war. Assault and capture Whiterun in the battle for Whiterun. Complete liberation of Skyrim with multiple fort battles. Fort Newgrad, Fort Sungard, Fort Snowhawk, Fort Hregstad. The final assault is the Battle for Solitude. Rikka fights to the death defending the city. Tullius surrenders. Elisif the Fair is coerced into supporting the Stormcloaks but stays as Jarl of Solitude. She's the only Jarl never replaced regardless of outcome. Stormcloak victory changes 4 Jarls. Vignar Greymane replaces Balgruf in Whiterun. Thongvor Silverblood replaces Igmund in the Reach. Dengir of Stoon replaces Sidgeir in Falkreath. Sorley the Builder replaces Idgrod Ravencrone in Hjalmarch. The arguments for the Stormcloaks focus on self-determination. Religious freedom is fundamental. The Empire is too weak to protect citizens from Thalmor abductions. The Justiciars drag people from their homes for worshipping Talos. Hammerfell proved independence is viable after they drove the Thalmor out alone. Nords have the right to govern themselves, but the Thalmor dossier reveals the uncomfortable truth. Ulfric was captured during the Great War and psychologically manipulated. He gave up information under torture that led to the fall of the Imperial City. He doesn't know this. The Thalmor consider him an asset, uncooperative but useful. They want the war to continue forever. Every Stormcloak who dies bleeding the Empire is a victory for the Dominion. The Civil War questline had massive cut content, dynamic campaigns, counterattacks, recruiting a giant named Goldar, magic-using troops, city battles for every hold, the ability to lose battles. The system uses 72 quests in the creation kit, making it probably the most complex quest group in the game. Most was cut due to engine limitations, but if you think a civil war manipulated by foreign agents is complicated, wait until you hear about the DLC faction war where both paths end with you killing the same Vampire King. The Dawnguard versus Volkihar Vampires. The Dawnguard DLC presents a single branching questline centered on the tyranny of the Sun Prophecy. Lord Harkon's plan, permanently blot out the sun using Oriel's bow dipped in the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour. The twist, the prophecy was fabricated by Archcurate Verther, a bitter snow elf vampire seeking revenge against his own god, Ariel. The entire DLC plot exists because of one embittered priest's grudge. At level 10 or higher, guards mention vampire hunters reforming near Riften, or an orc named Durak approaches directly. You travel to Fort Dawnguard, investigate Dimhollow Crypt, discover Serana sealed in a sarcophagus with an Elder Scroll. You escort her to Castle Volkihar. Lord Harkon offers his blood. Accepting joins the vampires. Refusing joins the Dawnguard. This choice is permanent. Fort Dawnguard was originally built to imprison a Jarl's vampiric son. Isran, a former vigilant of Stendar, reformed the order after vampires destroyed the Hall of the Vigilance. Key recruits include engineer Soreen Gerard, who develops crossbow technology, beast tamer Gunmar, who trains armored trolls for 500 gold, and priest Florentius Baenius, who claims to speak directly with Arche. Dawnguard rewards include crossbows as a new weapon type with dwarven variants and exploding bolts, sun spells like Sunfire and Vampire's Bane, and the final quest storming Castle Volkihar with the full Dawnguard force. Castle Volkihar is led by Lord Harkon, who sacrificed thousands of innocents to Molag Bal for vampirism. For women, becoming a daughter of Coldharbour required a degrading ritual with Molag Bal, strongly implied to involve sexual assault. This detail gives weight to Serana's trauma. The Vampire Lord transformation is the signature reward, a bat-like monstrous form with 11 perks. Key abilities include Vampiric Grip, telekinetically grabbing and choking enemies, Mist Form for invulnerability, and supernatural reflexes to slow time. The Bloodstone Chalice quest reveals internal court treachery. The second half is identical on both paths, chasing echoes, beyond death, unseen visions, touching the sky, kindred judgment. Both visit the Soul Cairn where Valerica hid with an Elder Scroll. Both visit the Forgotten Vale. Both end with killing Harkon. Even as his loyal vampire, you betray him. Serana sides with the player regardless of faction. You can obtain Vampire Lord form on either path by asking Serana later. Serana was sealed in Dimhollow Crypt during the First Era. She slept for thousands of years. She's curious about the changed world. Surprised there's an empire based in Cyrodiil. She's essential. Levels with the player gaining new spells, and has unique AI behaviors like sitting in chairs and commenting on weather. Widely considered Skyrim's best companion. She cannot be married. If you wear an Amulet of Mara, she refuses, saying temples frighten her due to her Molag Bal trauma. The Forgotten Vale reveals the tragic true history of the Falmer. The Snow Elves were elegant, golden-skinned elves who fled the Atmaran genocide by seeking Dwemer protection. The Dwemer forced them to eat a toxic blinding fungus, transforming them into the twisted modern Falmer. Knight Paladin Gelibor is possibly the last uncorrupted Snow Elf alive, having guarded the Wayshrines for millennia. He calls the modern Falmer the betrayed. Durnevir is a dragon trapped in the Soul Cairn after making a deal with the Ideal Master masters to guard Valerica until her death, but she's immortal. Teaching his Shout Soul tier, which deals massive damage plus Soul Trap plus Reanimate, makes him one of the most rewarding encounters. Jube, the very first NPC you meet in Morrowind, appears as a confused ghost in the Soul Cairn who doesn't know he's dead. Auriel's bow with sun-hallowed arrows rains burning light from the sky. With blood-cursed arrows created by Serana's blood, it blots out the sun. The same weapon serves either the light or the darkness. But the Dawnguard's faction choice has nothing on the moral dilemma at the heart of Skyrim's main quest, where two ancient orders force you to choose between redemption and revenge. The Blades and the Greybeards. These two factions are inseparable from the main quest and from each other. They represent opposing philosophies, action versus restraint, and they converge on the game's most debated moral choice. The Blades are ancient dragon slayers descended from the Akaviri Dragon Guard. Fierce dragon hunters from Akavir who invaded Tamriel were stopped by Dragonborn Raymond Cyrodiil and swore their lives to him. They evolved into the Emperor's elite espionage service over centuries. During the Great War, the Thalmor specifically targeted and nearly destroyed them. Only two known members survive in Skyrim. Delphine is acting Grandmaster, disguised as an innkeeper at the Sleeping Giant Inn in Riverwood, a high-priority Thalmor target, fiercely pragmatic and militant. Esbern is the lore archivist hiding in Riften's Ratway, terrified of Thalmor agents. He predicted the return of dragons. Together they lead you to Skyhaven Temple in the Reach, a massive fortress sealed by a dragonborn blood seal. Inside is Alduin's Wall, a monumental Akaviri sculptural relief depicting the prophecy of Alduin's defeat using Dragonrend. The player can recruit up to 3 followers to rebuild the blades. Dragonbane is a leveled Akaviri katana dealing 20 to 40 extra damage to dragons. Its level is locked when you first enter Skyhaven Temple, so savvy players wait until level 46 or higher. The Greybeards are an ancient monastic order founded by Jurgen Windcaller after the catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Red Mountain. He spent 7 years meditating on why the Thu'um had failed, concluding the gods punished Nords for arrogant misuse of the voice. He developed the way of the voice. The voice should be used for worship and contemplation, not warfare. Arngir is the only Greybeard who can speak safely to outsiders. The other 3, Bori, Einarth, and Wulfgar, have voices so powerful that speaking to someone would destroy them. When they whisper Dovahkiin at the recognition ceremony, the ground shakes. The tablets along the 7,000 steps from Ivarstead tell the history of the voice. Reading all 10 grants the blessing Voice of the Sky, where animals neither attack nor flee for 24 hours. Ulfric Stormcloak studied with the Greybeards but left before completing training. He never advanced far enough to train with Paarthurnax. Paarthurnax is the secret leader of the Greybeards and the Dragonborn's crucial mentor. An ancient dragon, likely born during the Dawn era, he was once Alduin's chief lieutenant who committed unspeakable atrocities. He rebelled against Alduin, taught humanity the Thu'um, and spent millennia in meditation at the throat of the world to overcome his draconic nature. He is the only white dragon in Skyrim, showing signs of extreme age. Voiced by Charles Martinet, the same actor who voiced Mario for over 30 years, completely unrecognizable. His iconic quote, "What is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?" After Alduin's Bane, Delphine and Esbern discover Paarthurnax is the Greybeard's leader. They refuse all further assistance until the Dragonborn kills him, invoking their oaths. The quest Paarthurnax triggers. If you kill Paarthurnax, you receive a dragon soul. The Blades reopen with dragon hunting quests, recruitment, and Esbern's potions. Arngir's furious. This is how you repay our trust? His noble spirit, the wisdom of ages, all gone, and for what? A mindless vendetta urged on you by a cabal of Akaviri barbarians. He threatens violence. The Greybeards cut you off from Wordwall locations and Paarthurnax's shout meditation bonuses permanently. If you spare Paarthurnax, the quest silently vanishes from the journal. The Blades refuse to speak with you. You lose dragon hunting quests and future Blades benefits. You keep Arngir's Wordwall guidance and Paarthurnax's meditation bonuses. If Paarthurnax is alive after Alduin's defeat, he delivers an epilogue speech about teaching the way of the voice to all dragons, then flies away. If he's dead, that future dies with him. Here's why this choice resonates. There is no good option. You lose something either way. The Blades are supposed to serve the Dragonborn, yet they issue ultimatums. Paarthurnax represents redemption through effort. The Blades represent justice for ancient war crimes. His very name means ambition overlord cruelty, and he fights against every letter of it daily. The gameplay heavily favors sparing him, as Greybeard Wordwall guidance far exceeds Blades' radiant quests in value. The Paarthurnax Dilemma mod by Arthmore, allowing players to force Delphine to stand down, became so popular that it was eventually hosted on Bethesda's own creations platform. The little girl Sissel in Rorikstead dreams of a good dragon who was old and grey but wasn't scary, almost certainly a prophetic vision of Paarthurnax. Skyrim contains 8 major joinable factions with full questlines. The player can become leader of the Companions, College, Thieves Guild, and Dark Brotherhood, all in a single playthrough. The 3 mutually exclusive choices, Imperial versus Stormcloak, Dawnguard versus Volkihar, and the Paarthurnax Dilemma, create the game's most consequential decision points. Every major faction follows the same narrative skeleton. Join as outsider, fighter, discover a terrible secret, watch the leader die, inherit command. Yet each tells a fundamentally different story about power. The companions ask whether a Daedric gift is worth your soul. The college asks whether knowledge always corrupts. The Thieves Guild asks whether luck is divine or earned. The Dark Brotherhood asks whether obedience or autonomy serves evil better. And the Civil War asks whether freedom or unity saves more lives. These questions have kept players arguing for over 14 years. Skyrim accidentally created one of gaming's most elaborate conspiracy theories through 5 randomly placed jars. 13 years later, we still don't know what they actually mean. That's why today, I'm breaking down every single unsolved lore mystery in Skyrim, starting with the one that drove the community absolutely insane. Bug jars. 5 jars containing living insects are scattered across Skyrim. A bee at Goldenglow Estate, a butterfly at the Alchemist's Shack, a dragonfly in Dushnik Jarl's cellar, a moth in Duskglow Crevice, a torch bug at Frostflow Lighthouse. Every single one has mysterious runic inscriptions carved into the inside of the cork lid. The runes don't match any known system. Players tried Elder Futhark, Younger Futhark, Proto-Norse, every runic alphabet that exists. Nothing translates consistently. The insects stay alive indefinitely and always face the same direction no matter how you rotate the jar. The most popular theory claims the 5 locations form a perfect pentagram on Skyrim's map with a shrine of Talos at the center, supposedly evidence of a Thalmor ritual to destroy reality. Players extracted fragments like Gift Horse Lake from the 15 total characters across all 5 lids, but the severe shortage of vowels makes actual translation impossible. In 2017, a Bethesda developer confirmed the jars were part of a scrapped quest cut early in development, except he never explained what the inscriptions actually mean. Game code shows 4 jars numbered sequentially, while the B jar uses completely different naming. The Saints and Seducer's creation added 3 more bug jars years later. Bethesda kept expanding the mystery instead of resolving it. Nobody in 13 years has definitively solved what the inscriptions mean, what the scrapped quest involved, or why Bethesda continues adding more jars through Creation Club content. The mystery persists specifically because the evidence is simultaneously too deliberate to be random and too incomplete to solve. But if you think random jars are disturbing, wait until you hear about the village sacrificing women for crop yields. Rorikstead is a tiny farming village in Skyrim's frozen tundra that produces impossibly abundant harvests. The founder Rorik claims he bought worthless land after the Great War. The village healer Juan Minette gets suspiciously defensive. Soul gems appear in every single house. Juan's quarters contain Spirit of the Daedra, a book about how Daedric princes harvest mortal souls. Only 3 copies exist in Skyrim. He secretly teaches young Sissel magic. What we do? The things I teach you, the others wouldn't understand. He teaches water breathing and candle tricks, not healing spells. Every young Nord woman in Rorikstead is dead. Lemkil's wife died giving birth to twins. Moralki's wife died when Eric was young. Juan couldn't save any of them. Lokir of Rorikstead stammers his hometown's name with genuine fear at Helgen before getting executed. Nobody in Rorikstead acknowledges he existed. But here's where it breaks everything. The book, The Atlas of Dragons, references Rorikstead in 2E 373, thousands of years before the mortal man Rorik was born. The dominant theory is that Juan and Rorik made a bargain with a Daedric prince, trade fertile women for fertile land. Soul gems trap the sacrificed souls. Bethesda likely planned a larger cult quest that got cut, leaving only the environmental storytelling. During Arena, a village called Lanealton occupied this exact location, then vanished completely. The recursive pattern of settlements appearing, disappearing, and reappearing suggests something far older than Rorik Kant. At least Rorikstead's darkness stays in one village. Unlike the ghost who revealed Talos was never one person. Old Hroldan. Sleep in Tiber Septim's room at Old Hroldan Inn past 1 a.m. and a ghostly Nord soldier appears. He calls you Hjalti, a name most players have never heard. You don't remember me, Hjalti? He demands a sword oath and mentions the Swordmasters of Alcair, a region in High Rock. Innkeeper Idas only knows Tiber Septim had many names. This quest validates the Arcturian heresy, arguing that Talos is not one person but an oversoul of 3 beings. Hjalti Earlybeard was a Breton youth from Alcair who became Tiber Septim. Ysmir Wolfhearth was an ancient undead Nord king whose storm powers accompanied Hjalti. Zurin Arctus was the imperial battle mage. Through catastrophic events involving the Mantella and Numidium, they merged into Talos. The ghost's mention of Alcair confirms Hjaldi was Breton, not the Nordic hero official history describes. The ghost mistakes the Dragonborn for Hjalti because both carry the same Lorcan-connected divine spark. This undermines both narratives. Stormcloaks claim Talos as pure Nord hero. The Empire claims Talos as singular divine emperor. The Civil War is fought over simplified mythology. Bethesda included this quest as subtle confirmation that the truth is far stranger than either side understands. The heresy describes how at Old Hroldan, Hjalti went to the gates, and the storm followed above his head, shouting down the walls. This specific reference to storm voice powers explains why the ghost remembers campaigns with someone who could shout, connecting directly to the Dragonborn's Thu'um abilities and creating the case of mistaken identity across thousands of years. But at least Talos's confusion doesn't break the Dark Brotherhood, unlike what happens when a child's prayer reaches nobody. The Black Sacrament. Orphan Aventus Aretino performs the Black Sacrament against his abusive caretaker Grelad the Kind. Except in 4E201, the Dark Brotherhood has no listener. The Night Mother hasn't spoken to anyone in years. Without a listener, Black Sacrament prayers cannot be relayed. Astrid's Falkreath Sanctuary listens for rumors, not divine contracts. When Aventus performs the sacrament, nobody should hear it, yet the Dragonborn ends up at that orphanage anyway. Grelad has exactly 1 HP, mechanically designed to die instantly. No bounty applies for killing her inside the orphanage. The orphans cheer. Runa Fairshield says, "Kill one person, and you can solve so many problems." I wonder at the possibilities. The Dragonborn fulfills a contract they never received, gets a "we know" note with a black handprint, and Astrid kidnaps them as recruitment. The question is whether the Night Mother orchestrated events despite having no listener. She heard Aventus, but couldn't relay it officially. Did she influence circumstances to draw the Dragonborn toward Aventus? The accidental fulfillment leads to Brotherhood membership, which leads to becoming the listener she desperately needed. The scenario also critiques the Brotherhood's decline. A child's prayers going unanswered while an untrained adventurer stumbles into the job demonstrates how thoroughly Astrid's deviation broke the organization. The irony deepens when you realize Astrid's leadership mirrors Grelad's. Both run dysfunctional families that would be better off without them. Aventus performs an entire ritual involving a human heart, nightshade, and a skeletal effigy while chanting to the Night Mother. The precision of his ritual suggests someone taught him, or he found explicit instructions. Nobody questions where a child learned forbidden Dark Brotherhood rites, raising the possibility the Night Mother herself planted the knowledge to engineer the entire sequence. But if the Night Mother orchestrating events is disturbing, wait until you hear she's actually a Daedric prince wearing a corpse. The Night Mother. The Night Mother is either a murdered Dunmer woman or a Daedric prince wearing a corpse. The Night Mother's truth claims she was Dunmer, who killed her 5 children and was murdered by villagers. Fire and Darkness flatly states the Night Mother is Mephala, the Daedric prince of lies and murder. Sacred Witness claims she was a little old lady from the Thieves Guild. The author was found dead with black and white stones over his eyes. In Skyrim, the corpse has human features despite lore calling her Dunmer. Rounded ears, human skin tone. Shooting the coffin with Soul Trap produces purple energy as if striking a living entity. She speaks directly to the Dragonborn during Whispers in the Dark, demonstrating agency Corpse's lack. The Mephala connection runs deep. In the Whispering Door, Mephala manipulates Jarl Balgruf's son through lies and secrets. The Morag Tong, the Brotherhood's predecessor, explicitly served Mephala. Their black hands parallel the Brotherhood's Black Hand organization. In Daggerfall, the Iliac Bay Brotherhood openly worshipped Mephala as Queen of Oblivion. The most elegant theory synthesizes every contradiction. A mortal woman genuinely existed, killed her children, and died. But Mephala now inhabits her corpse as a vessel, controlling the Brotherhood through deception, making the entire organization unwitting servants of a Daedric prince, while believing they serve Sithis. This represents the ultimate expression of Mephala's sphere, a lie so complete even the faithful don't know they're deceived. Bethesda maintains this ambiguity across 5 games because resolving it would undermine an organization built on secrets. Fire and Darkness explicitly states the truth, but players dismiss it because contradictory sources exist, which is exactly how Mephala would want it. But at least the deception stays within one organization, unlike the Ebony Warrior, who wants a death that might be impossible. The Ebony Warrior, at level 80, a warrior in full ebony armor, approaches the Dragonborn. "I have done all that can be done. There is nothing left, except for you." He asks the Dragonborn to send him to Sovngarde with honor, then waits at last vigil for his final battle, except he's a Redguard, a race whose afterlife is the far shores, not Sovngarde. He's asking for an afterlife he cannot reach. Looting his body reveals impossible inventory. He carries a human heart and Daedra heart simultaneously. No other humanoid NPC carries both. Combined with his filled Black Soul Gem, his inventory contains exact components for Daedric ritual at the Atronach Forge. He uses dragon shouts despite being neither Dragonborn nor Nord. He stands at 1.21 scale, one of the tallest NPCs. And here's the kicker. If you kill him before visiting Sovngarde, he never appears there. Unlike every other killable NPC with Sovngarde connections, he's just gone. The leading theory connects him to Raymond Ebonarm, a forgotten war god from Daggerfall who wore ebony armor. Others see him as the Hunding, the Redguard make-way god. The Umbra theory notes parallels to Morrowind's warrior possessed by Clavicus Vile's soul-trapping sword. The most meta interpretation reads him as a mirror of the maxed-out player. His dialogue about exhausting all quests is exactly what a level 80 player experiences. His 6 lines of dialogue, 0 backstory, and absent afterlife make him either the game's deepest character study or its most tantalizing loose end. Bethesda gave us a warrior who accomplished everything, wants one thing and cannot have it. Whether he's trapped between identities, possessed by a Daedric artifact, or exists as a mirror of player exhaustion, we'll never know. No journal, no backstory, no name, just an impossible request. But at least his mystery affects one person, unlike the Eye of Magnus, which could unravel reality and nobody knows what it is. The Eye of Magnus. The enormous glowing orb beneath Saarthal is never identified by anyone. Tolfdir rules out Dwemer, Falmer, Ayleid, and Daedric origins. The Psijic Order calls it too dangerous, but won't explain why. Ancano taps into it and declares he holds the power to unravel the world. Nobody disputes this. The Synod's Oculary detects only 2 magical signatures across all of Tamriel, the Eye and the Staff of Magnus. The Eye overshadows every other artifact on the continent, including 3 Elder Scrolls. The official game guide describes the Eye as having a similar origin to the Elder Scrolls, fragments of creation beyond time. The Augur of Dunlane says, to see through Magnus's eye without being blinded, you require his staff, implying the staff controls the eye. Khajiit mythology describes how Magrus had his eye torn out by Azura, who made it into the Ether Prism, possibly a literal origin for this artifact. The dominant theory proposes the eye contains Magnus's blueprints for creation itself. Magnus was the architect of Mundus, who fled before completion, tearing a hole through oblivion that became the sun. If he carried schematics for reality, and Ancano's unraveling line is literal, then possessing the blueprints gives power to unmake creation. The Snow Elves may have attacked Saarthal specifically to seize this object, making the Eye the true cause of the Night of Tears. After Ancano's defeat, the Psijic Order takes the Eye to Artaeum without explanation. They never clarify why they're qualified custodians of an artifact that disrupts even their foresight. The college gets 0 say. The Dragonborn isn't consulted. The Psijics decide they're taking the universe-destroying artifact to their secret island that phases in and out of reality, and everyone accepts it. Nobody knows what the Eye is. Nobody knows what the Psijics are doing with it. And the Snow Elves potentially understanding its danger better than Nords raises uncomfortable questions about whether Skyrim's founding myth is built on a lie. But if one artifact is concerning, wait until you hear about the historical event that might justify genocide. Night of Tears. Nordic tradition holds that Snow Elves massacred Saarthal unprovoked. Only Ysgramor and his sons survived, returning with the 500 companions for righteous vengeance. Every Nord child learns this founding myth, except in-game books tell a different story. The Imperial Report on Saarthal reveals Snow Elves demonstrated an intricate understanding of the city's layout before launching their assault. Their attack was a specific directive, and perhaps a singular goal, not random genocide. Night of Tears concludes, the Nords found something buried deep. They attempted to keep it buried, but the elves learned of it and coveted it. The Eye of Magnus is the obvious candidate. This reframes Ysgramor as potentially a war criminal. His response was catastrophically disproportionate. Surviving Snow Elves were brutally bound and burnt alive, or chained and enslaved. Azadal provided magically enhanced weapons for genocide. Survivors who sought Dwemer refuge were enslaved, fed toxic fungi, and transformed into the Blind Falmer. Knight Paladin Gelibor represents the only uncorrupted Snow Elf survivor. But here's the provocative counter-theory. What if Snow Elves weren't stealing the Eye but trying to reseal or destroy it? They understood its apocalyptic potential while Nords remained ignorant. The specific directive wasn't greed, but preventing catastrophe. Ysgramor slaughtered them for it, then built a myth painting his victims as monsters. Jirik Galderson, sealed in Saarthal next to the Eye centuries later, raises questions about who placed him there and whether he's guardian or prisoner. Someone understood the Eye needed watching. Bethesda deliberately juxtaposes contradictory narratives without resolution. The game provides both heroic Nordic legend and damning Imperial research, forcing players to question whether Skyrim's founding myth is built on a lie, whether Snow Elves were aggressors or heroes, whether Ysgramor was savior or genocidal conqueror. And if snow elves understood the eye's danger, who else knew? The Psijic Order's sudden interest in an artifact buried for thousands of years suggests they knew exactly what was in Saarthal long before the college started digging. The Psijic Order, unseen for over a century, suddenly intervenes at the college with suspicious precision. Monk Narian appears in a vision only the Dragonborn can see, warning you have set in motion a chain of events that cannot be stopped. They never contact Archmage Savos Aaron, Tolfdir, or any senior mage. Only the brand new initiate. Quaranir later freezes time, admitting the eye's energy blocked their visions. He identifies the Thalmor as enemies, but his most revealing statement comes after Ancano's defeat. We knew you would succeed. Your victory here justifies our belief in you. He then installs the Dragonborn as Archmage, revealing this had been their intent from the start. The entire intervention was calculated to secure the eye and place a sympathetic leader at the college. The contradictions pile up. They claim not to typically intervene directly while orchestrating elaborate multi-step intervention. They say the future is obscured yet express confident foreknowledge. They take the eye for safekeeping without explaining qualifications when the artifact disrupts even their powers. Their island Artaeum has vanished twice from physical reality. In ESO Somerset, the Psijic questline involves sealing time breaches and recovering the Staff of Towers, an artifact connected to metaphysical anchors of reality. If the Thalmor's goal is deactivating towers to unmake Mundus, the Psijic's interest in tower-related artifacts suggests cosmic-scale counter-operations. Their Skyrim intervention may be one move in a millennia-long chess game. But here's what nobody talks about. The Psijics knew about the eye before excavation. Their response was too fast, too precise. Narian appears the moment you touch it, not days later. They were watching Saarthal. They knew what was buried there, and they waited until someone else dug it up, then swooped in once danger was neutralized. They used the college as free labor. They used the Dragonborn as a weapon. Then they installed that weapon as Archmage to ensure cooperation. The entire questline wasn't about stopping Ancano. It was about reclaiming an artifact they've monitored for thousands of years. But if one organization manipulating events is disturbing, wait until you hear about the entire race that vanished and what one researcher proved happened. Arnilgain. The Dwemer race vanished simultaneously in 1E700 when Kagranak struck the heart of Lorcan with tonal tools. Every account contradicts. Vivek claims they disappeared from the world. Ashlanders say they turned into dust. Yagrum Bagern, the sole survivor, was in an outer realm when it happened and has no idea what occurred. Even Vivek admits, I have no sense of them in the timeless divine world outside of mortal time. College researcher Arniel Gain secretly attempts to replicate the event. His quest has the Dragonborn obtain a warped soul gem as substitute for the heart and keening, one of Kagranak's actual tools. Arniel strikes the gem with keening once. Nothing. Twice. Nothing. The third strike, he vanishes in a flash. The quest completes. The Dragonborn receives summon Arniel's shade, calling his ghost. This is the most terrifying thing in Skyrim. This parallel is strongest evidence for the skin of the Numidium theory. Just as Arniel became a shade bound to the Dragonborn, summonable on command, the Dwemer became shades bound to the Numidium, their artificial god construct. Dwemer ghosts appeared in Morrowind's ruins during the Third Era, while Dagoth Ur built a Kulakan, a Numidium replica. When the Nerevarine destroyed a Kulakan, the ghosts stopped appearing. That temporal correlation strongly suggests Dwemer souls are tethered to Numidium-type constructs. So the Sill's remark cuts deepest. You wonder where the Dwemer have gone? Perhaps better to wonder why one remains. This implies Yagrum's survival, not the disappearance, is the true anomaly. Kagranak didn't achieve ascension. He created spectral servitude. The entire Dwemer race exists in tragic half-existence, and Arniel proved it's real by doing it to himself. Nobody at the college mentions Arniel's disappearance. Nobody investigates. You can summon his ghost in front of other mages and they don't react. The game treats his vanishing as minor footnote when it's confirmation of what happened to an entire civilization. Arniel didn't just solve Elder Scrolls' greatest mystery. He became the answer, and you can summon him at will, making him serve in combat. Exactly the nightmare fate the Dwemer suffer, but at least the Dwemer's fate was an accident. Unlike Skyrim's Civil War, designed to have no right answer. Ulfric's Stormcloak. The Thalmor dossier on Ulfric, found in Elenwen's Solar, is the most important document in Skyrim's politics. It classifies Ulfric as asset, uncooperative, dormant, and reveals the Thalmor broke him during the Great War, then made him believe information from his interrogation was crucial in capturing the Imperial City. The city had in fact fallen before he had broken. They manufactured guilt to make him manipulable, then let him escape. The operational notes are unambiguous. As long as the Civil War proceeds in its current indecisive fashion, we should remain hands-off. A Stormcloak victory must be avoided. An Imperial victory must also be avoided. The Thalmor's optimal scenario is perpetual war. men killing men while both sides weaken. The Helgen note confirms they intervened to prevent Ulfric's execution, because it would have ended the war too quickly. Ulfric is an unwitting pawn, an asset, not an agent. His anger is genuine, but deliberately cultivated. The Bear of Markarth describes his atrocity. After retaking the Reach, every official who worked for the Forsworn was put to the sword, even after they had surrendered. Yet the Empire's position is equally compromised. They nearly executed the Dragonborn without trial, and Jarl Balgruuf privately worships Talos while publicly enforcing the ban. Bethesda reinforced this ambiguity structurally. Extensive cut Civil War content was planned, but removed. No subsequent game confirms which side won. The player cannot share the Thalmor dossier with any NPC. The game provides no mechanism to expose the manipulation. By design, you can show Ulfric proof the Thalmor played him. Nothing happens. You can tell Tullius the enemy wants endless war. He doesn't care. The questline forces you to pick a side while revealing that picking either side serves the actual enemy. The game's season unending offers temporary peace to fight Alduin. The moment the dragon threat ends, they resume killing each other. The dragons nearly end the world, and both sides learned nothing. Players spent 13 years arguing whether Empire or Stormcloaks are right. That's the point. Bethesda designed the war so thoroughly ambiguous that both sides have legitimate grievances and fatal flaws. The Thalmor win either way, and the game never lets you expose the truth, because the truth doesn't matter when both sides are too proud to listen. But if one manipulated war is disturbing, wait until you hear the Thalmor might be trying to unmake reality itself. The Thalmor's endgame. The deepest mystery concerns the Thalmor's ultimate goal. Surface evidence shows political ambition. The White Gold Concordat, Talos bans, Justiciar patrols. But evidence suggests the Inner Circle pursues something far more radical. The systematic deactivation of metaphysical towers that anchor Mundus to existence, with the goal of unmaking the mortal world and returning Altmer to pre-creation divine state. The prophecy of the Dragonborn is explicitly a tower text. When the brass tower walks and time is reshaped, when the red tower trembles, when the white tower falls, when the snow tower lies sundered, kingless, the World Eater wakes. Each line references a tower deactivated across previous games. Red Tower, Heart of Lorkhan destroyed. White Gold Tower, Amulet of Kings destroyed when Martin sacrificed himself. Crystal Like Law fell during Oblivion Crisis. Walk Brass, Numidium, destroyed at Daggerfall. Only Adamantia and High Rock definitively remains active. Michael Kirkbride's Altmeri commentary on Talos provides framework. To kill man is to reach heaven. We must erase the upstart Talos from the mythic. His presence fortifies the wheel of convention and binds our souls to this plane. If Talos derives power from worship, then banning worship isn't political persecution. It's cosmological warfare to weaken a god who anchors mortal reality. In-game Thalmor behave as political actors, not cosmic villains. Yet ESO referenced towers explicitly. The prophecy is undeniably a tower text embedded in-game. The most likely synthesis: lower-ranking Thalmor pursue political dominion while the Inner Circle quietly works towards something most Altmer would never support. The Thalmor's Talos ban makes sense politically. It humiliates the Empire, but if Talos is a tower, if worship sustains his divine presence, if his existence anchors the mortal world, then the ban takes on apocalyptic significance. They're attempting deactivation of a metaphysical anchor holding reality together, and they're winning. Red Tower, destroyed. White Gold, deactivated. Crystal Like Law, fallen. Walk Brass, gone. Snow Tower, sundered, kingless, bleeding during Skyrim's Civil War. Only Adamantia remains, located exactly where Elder Scrolls 6 is set. Every game, another tower falls. Every game, reality becomes more unstable. The Thalmor, whether they fully understand or not, are orchestrating the slow unmaking of existence itself. The most disturbing possibility isn't that they'll fail, it's that they'll succeed, and by the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be too late. Dragon priests are Skyrim's ancient nightmare fuel, servants of the dragons who were so devoted to their masters that they refused to stay dead. They clawed their way back as some of the most powerful undead enemies in the entire game. Today I'm ranking every single one from least to most powerful, and explaining exactly what makes each of them terrifying, starting at the bottom with a priest who had the most elaborate plan to cheat death and still ended up last, Hevnorak. Hevnorak is the most over-prepared failure in Elder Scrolls history, and I can prove it. Before he died, this guy literally drained all the blood from his own body as part of a calculated ritual to resurrect himself as a lich. Not a panic move, not a last resort, a premeditated step-by-step plan to achieve immortality. In life, he built an entire army through mind control, torturing his followers into total submission until they had zero free will left. You can still find the torture devices scattered throughout Valthuum as evidence of what he did to people. Here's where it gets really interesting. An ancient warrior named Valdar considered Hevnarak so dangerous that he voluntarily imprisoned his own soul inside Valthuum just to keep Hevnarak too weak to fully come back. Think about that. A man chose eternal death just to babysit this guy's corpse. But here's the kicker. After all of that, the blood ritual, the mind control army, the warrior who sacrificed everything to contain him, Hevnorak wakes up and fights you with basic shock magic, chain lightning, a storm Atronak, and his own unique lightning staff, roughly 545 magicka and 1,490 health at a fixed level 50. That's it. Every bit of his terrifying mind control ability, gone. Completely absent from his combat toolkit. The most calculated path to immortality in all of Skyrim, and he ends up at the bottom of the list. But at least Hevnorak had a plan. The next priest on our list couldn't even manage that, Vokun. Vokun might be the most forgettable dragon priest in the entire game, and honestly, that's kind of impressive when you think about it. In a lineup of ancient undead sorcerers who ruled over civilizations, commanded dragons, and terrorized entire regions, Vokun is just there. His name means shadow in the dragon language, which is almost too perfect. The guy literally fades into the background. He guards Highgate Ruins in the Pale, sitting next to one of Skyrim's least visited word walls. Even the game seems to have forgotten about him. There's no major quest tied to his encounter, no dramatic backstory waiting in journals scattered across his tomb, no personality to speak of. You walk in, you fight him, you leave. That's it. And here's the thing, his stats are completely standard. 1,490 health, 545 magicka, fixed level 50. Nothing that separates him from half the other priests on this list. He hits you with the same destruction spells you've seen a dozen times before. Zero surprises, zero memorable moments. He is the definition of just another boss. But here's where it gets interesting. His mask is actually one of the more useful ones in the game for certain builds. It gives you a 20% cost reduction to Conjuration, Alteration, and Illusion, which is a utility caster's dream. And because it's classified as heavy armor despite being entirely magic focused, it's perfect for arcane warrior builds that want spell efficiency without sacrificing armor rating. So the irony of Vokun is this. The priest himself left almost no historical record, no documented deeds, no legacy worth mentioning, but the mask he drops, genuinely solid. The most anonymous dragon priest in Skyrim carries one of the better rewards, but if you think Vokun is unremarkable, at least he didn't drive his own followers to mass suicide. That honor belongs to someone far worse, Ragat. Ragat's followers killed themselves to get away from him. Let that sink in for a second. This wasn't an enemy army storming the gates. His own cult members, people who had willingly devoted their lives to serving the dragons, chose mass suicide over spending another day under this man's leadership. And they didn't just do it to escape the torture. They did it to prevent Ragat from capturing their souls after death. That's how terrified they were. Even dying wasn't far enough away from him. Forelhost, the ruin where you find Ragat, is essentially a crime scene frozen in time. Notes and journals scattered throughout the dungeon document exactly what happened there. The psychological manipulation, the physical torture, the slow, deliberate breaking of every person under his command. You're walking through a place where an entire chapter of the dragon cult was systematically destroyed from the inside by the very priests they served. It's one of the most genuinely disturbing pieces of environmental storytelling in the entire game, and most players just sprint through it looking for loot. In combat, Ragat fights with fire-based destruction magic. Wall of fire, lingering flame attacks, the works. His baseline stats match the previous two priests we've covered, but fire's lingering damage makes him slightly more punishing than shock or frost equivalents. You take the hit, and then you keep taking damage for seconds afterward. It adds up fast if you're not paying attention. His mask adds 70 points of stamina, which is interesting. That's not a caster's reward. That's a warrior's bonus, hinting that Ragat was a warrior priest in life, someone who combined physical brutality with magical dominance. It fits perfectly with the image of a leader who ruled through direct, personal violence rather than distant magical manipulation. But here's the familiar irony. A priest so feared that hundreds of people chose death over his company? In Undeath, he's a moderate difficulty fight that any prepared player clears without much trouble. The man who made an entire cult commit suicide to escape him gets taken down by a dragonborn with a couple of fire resistance potions. But if you think Ragat's backstory is dark, wait until you meet a ruler whose madness destroyed an entire city that once loved him. Otar the Mad. Every dragon priest we've covered so far has been pretty straightforward evil. Power-hungry tyrants, sadistic cult leaders, the usual. But Otar? Otar is different. And honestly, his story hits harder than any of them. Here's the thing. Otar the Mad wasn't always mad. Historical accounts describe him as a genuinely beloved Nordic chieftain who ruled the city of Ragnvald with wisdom and justice. His people actually liked him, not feared him, not obeyed him out of terror. They respected him. He was, by all accounts, a good leader. And then something broke him. Nobody knows exactly what it was. Maybe Daedric influence crept into his mind. Maybe he dabbled in dark arts that slowly consumed him. Maybe it was just the crushing, corrupting weight of absolute power grinding down a good man over decades. Whatever the cause, Otar's mind shattered, and the wise chieftain became a violent, unpredictable despot. The transformation was so complete, they literally added the mad to his name. But here's the part that makes this story genuinely tragic. It wasn't some outside hero who stopped him. It wasn't the Dragonborn or a legendary warrior. His own people rose against him. Two of his own warriors overthrew and imprisoned him. The man they once loved became the man they had to lock away. In combat, Odar fights with shock-based destruction magic. Chain Lightning, Command Daedra, Ebony Flesh, Greater Ward. He's moderately difficult, particularly punishing if you show up without shock resistance. Nothing game-breaking, but he'll make you work for it. His mask is where the irony gets almost poetic. It grants 30% resistance to fire, frost, and shock simultaneously. That's the most balanced defensive mask in the entire Dragon Priest lineup. A perfectly balanced mask for a man who was once perfectly balanced himself, before he lost everything that made him who he was. No quest ties Otar to the player. There's no NPC sending you to Ragnvald, no storyline pulling you toward his sarcophagus. He's just sitting there in the dark, waiting for someone to finally put him down. And that isolation feels painfully appropriate for a ruler whose own people turned their backs on him. But if Otar's story made you feel something, the next priest is going to test your patience in a completely different way. Croesus. Croesus is officially classified as a frost dragon priest. His mask is cold-based. His elemental designation says Frost, and then he shows up to the fight wielding the Staff of Fireballs. Let me explain why this matters. Most dragon priests commit to one element, and you can plan around it. Bring frost resistance for a frost priest, fire resistance for a fire priest. Simple, but Croesus throws that entire system out the window. His spell loadout is exactly what you'd expect. Icy Spear, Ice Storm, Frost Cloak, all frost destruction. But then he pulls out a staff that launches fireballs at you between casts. You show up prepared for ice damage and immediately eat a fireball to the face. The slow, creeping frost spells force you to dodge in one direction, while lingering burn damage from the staff punishes you for standing still. It's a nasty combination that no single elemental resistance can fully counter. But here's where it gets even more ridiculous. His frost spells and fire staff create a dual element nightmare that most players aren't ready for. You stack frost resistance and the fireballs shred you. You stack fire resistance and the icy spears cut right through. He's not a specialist, he's chaos. And somehow that makes him more dangerous than if he just picked one element and committed to it. Now add the real problem. Croesus is the only dragon priest in Skyrim guarded by a live dragon. Sheerpoint has both him and a leveled dragon sitting at the same location, meaning the second you engage one, you're fighting both. Every player who's stumbled onto Sheerpoint at level 15 knows exactly how that goes. You're trying to dodge dragon fire from the sky, while a floating skeleton wizard pelts you with frost and fire on the ground. It's a two-front nightmare that pushes Croesus well above where his individual stats would place him. And after all that, after surviving elemental chaos and a dragon simultaneously, your reward is a mask that gives 20% bonuses to lockpicking, archery, and alchemy. 0 combat bonuses. Not a single point of extra damage or resistance. You just fought one of the most unpredictable encounters in the game for a stealth utility mask. It's almost insulting, but at least Croesus only has one dragon backing him up. The next priest doesn't need backup at all. Volsung. Every dragon priest you fought up to this point has had a weakness, a specialty, a school of magic they lean on, which means a resistance you can stack to shut them down. Volsung doesn't play that game. Here's what makes him different. On paper, Volsung shares the same primary skill set as a handful of other priests: alteration, conjuration, destruction, restoration, but most priests lean heavily on one element or one strategy in actual combat. Volsung doesn't pick a lane. He's not a fire guy, he's not a frost guy, he's not a shock guy. He's all of them, and he will switch between elements whenever he wants, making him one of the most unpredictable fights on the mainland. That unpredictability is the problem. You stack fire resistance, he hits you with frost. you prepare for Frost, he switches to Shock. There is no single resistance setup that neutralizes Volsung because he will always have something else in his back pocket. Every other priest on this list has a counter you can reliably exploit. Volsung makes that approach a gamble every time, but it gets worse. He also packs Command Daedra, meaning he can turn your own summoned allies against you mid-fight, and if you think you'll just out-magic him, good luck. Volsung has exceptionally high magical resistance compared to his peers, so trying to cast your way through this fight is a losing proposition. You can't out-resist him, and you can't out-spell him. He shares the same level 50 base stats as every mainland priest below him, but the way he cycles through his full toolkit means he fights like a mage way above his weight class. Preparation actually matters here, because generic strategies fail, and then you beat him, and he drops a carry weight increase, 20% better merchant prices, and permanent water breathing. One of the most versatile magical threats on the mainland drops a mask for shopping and swimming. It's genuinely one of the most practical masks in the entire set for actual adventuring, but the irony of earning it from this fight is almost insulting. Oh, and you don't just walk up to Volsung either. Reaching him requires solving multiple riddles and navigating significant environmental puzzles throughout Volskiga. By the time you finally reach the summit, you've already worked for it. But if Volsung is the priest that punishes lazy preparation, the next one punishes you for showing up at all. Nakreen. Most dragon priests guard a ruin. Nakreen guards the doorway to the afterlife, and that distinction changes everything about how you should think about him. His name translates to vengeance in the dragon language, and he's stationed at Skuldafn, the final checkpoint before you enter Sovngarde, the Nordic realm of the honored dead. This isn't some random posting. Alduin, the World Eater himself, specifically trusted Nakreen to guard the single most important door in the entire main quest. You don't get that assignment by being average. Here's where it gets interesting. Nakreen is one of only 2 dragon priests in the entire game who doesn't rise from a sarcophagus. When you arrive at Skuldafn, he's already standing, already waiting, because he never stopped guarding. Every other priest wakes up when you disturb their tomb. Nakreen was never asleep. That small detail says more about his dedication to Alduin's cause than any stat sheet ever could. In combat, he masters all 3 destruction elements: fire, frost, and lightning. That's more comprehensive elemental coverage than most priests ranked below him, and just like Volsung, this multi-element approach means you can't just stack one resistance and call it a day. Fire resist won't save you from his lightning. Frost resist won't stop the flames. He forces you to actually fight him on his terms. He also speaks exclusively in the dragon language during combat, not Tamrielic. Even in Undeath, thousands of years later, he considers the common tongue beneath him. But here's the kicker. He wields a dragon priest staff that literally functions as the key to opening the Sovngarde portal. You have to kill him to proceed. No workarounds, no alternate routes. Well, technically, some players have discovered you can whirlwind sprint past him to reach the portal area, treating him as an obstacle rather than a mandatory fight. But doing that means forfeiting his mask, and since Skuldafn is completely inaccessible after you complete the quest, you'll never get another chance. He's one of the most permanently missable items in the entire game. Nakreen's power isn't just about his spells or his stats. It's about what he represents. He's the last thing standing between you and the World Eater's domain, and Alduin chose him for that job. But if Nakreen earned his rank by guarding a door, the next priest earned his by being so dangerous that an entire expedition had to sacrifice themselves just to keep him contained. Maroki. Maroke's name means glorious in the dragon language, and honestly, he earns it, because when the Archmage of the College of Winterhold, Savos Aran, first encountered this priest deep inside Labyrinthian, he couldn't beat him, not even close. Aran's solution was so desperate it borders on unforgivable. He sacrificed his own companions, the people who trusted him, to create a magical containment field powerful enough to keep Maroke trapped indefinitely. Let that sink in for a second. When you finally reach Maroke during the college quest line, he's still bound in place. 2 enthralled wizards stand frozen on either side of him, the last survivors of Aaron's original expedition. They've been locked there for years, sustaining the prison with their own life force, fully conscious but unable to move or speak. And here's where it gets dark. You have to kill them to free Morike before you can even fight him. You're the one who ends their suffering, and you're the one who releases the thing they literally died to contain. That alone makes this one of the most emotionally heavy encounters in the entire game. But Morike himself is no pushover once he's loose. He holds the Staff of Magnus, one of the most powerful artifacts in all of Tamriel, created by the god Magnus himself. The staff can absorb magical energy directly from enemies, draining their power while fueling his own. And if you make the mistake of initiating dialogue with him mid-encounter, he instantly drains your magicka completely. Doesn't matter what protective measures you have, talking to him is a trap. He knows it too. Morike refers to the Tamrielic language as guttural, and refuses to speak anything but the dragon tongue. That tells you everything about how he views you. You're not a threat to him, you're beneath him. You're an insect that somehow wandered into his prison. His combat stats sit at level 50, matching other high-tier priests on paper. But the Staff of Magnus changes the equation entirely. The fact that Savos Aran, one of the most powerful living mages in Skyrim, couldn't defeat him and instead had to sacrifice multiple lives just to keep him contained, tells you his real power goes far beyond what the numbers suggest. But if Morike's frost-free arsenal impressed you, wait until you meet a priest whose entire identity revolves around cold, dishonor, and the frozen wastes of Solstheim. Dukan, welcome to Solstheim, because everything you've fought up to this point just became the tutorial. Dukan is the first of the Solstheim dragon priests, and the difficulty spike is immediate. Every single mainland priest caps at level 50. Dukan fixed at level 60. That means more health, more magicka, more stamina, more everything. This isn't a subtle increase. This is Bethesda telling you the training wheels are off. His name translates to dishonor in the dragon language, and here's the thing. Nobody knows what that actually refers to. Did Dukan do something dishonorable? Was something dishonorable done to him? The lore never clarifies. It's just this hanging, unresolved detail that makes him slightly more unsettling than a priest with a straightforward name like Bloodsword or Glorious. Dishonor implies a story. We just never get to hear it. But what we do get is his combat style, and it's brutal. Dukan is a frost specialist. His mask enhances ice spells by 25%, meaning every single frost attack he throws hits harder than it would from an equivalent unmasked mage. And frost magic in Skyrim isn't just about damage. It slows your movement speed and drains your stamina. If you're a melee player trying to close distance, congratulations, you're playing his game now. Every step toward him gets slower. Every swing costs more. Warriors find Dukan particularly punishing because his entire kit is designed to keep you at range while he chips away at your ability to fight back. And he doesn't fight alone. Dukan summons Seekers, those tentacled Daedric servants of Hermaeus Mora, to fight alongside him. So now you're dealing with frost magic slowing you to a crawl, stamina draining with every hit, and multiple enemies attacking from different angles inside a confined tomb space. Whiteridge Barrow doesn't exactly give you room to maneuver. The reward for surviving all of this is the Black Book the Sallow Regent, which grants significant power bonuses that genuinely justify the difficulty spike. At least Bethesda had the decency to put something worthwhile behind this wall. The level 60 baseline, the frost debuffs, the summoned allies. Dukan is a clear step above anything on the mainland, and he's the easiest of the Solstheim priests. But if you think a frost specialist is bad, wait until you meet the priest who turns lightning into an art form, Zakrisos. Every dragon priest in Skyrim has a fixed power level. They wake up from their sarcophagus at the same strength whether you're level 10 or level 80. They're frozen in time, locked to whatever power they held when they died thousands of years ago. Zakrisos doesn't play by those rules. He's the only dragon priest in the entire game whose level actually scales with the player. At low levels, he sits at level 25. At high levels, he caps out at 60. That means he's specifically designed to always be a threat, no matter when you walk into Bloodskull Barrow. No other dragon priest works this way, not one. The only other scaled encounter even close to this is Miraak himself, and that's the final boss of an entire DLC. Here's where it gets interesting. Every other priest has a fixed historical baseline. Their power is a snapshot of who they were when they died. Zakrisos is different. His power is fundamentally tied to whoever is confronting him. He calibrates to the Dragonborn. That's either the developers being incredibly clever with encounter design, or it's a lore-rich detail about the nature of his power. Either way, it makes him feel less like a static obstacle and more like a rival. He grows to meet you. His name translates to Bloodsword, and his specialty is shock magic. At level 60, he has access to the highest tier electrical destruction spells in the game: Lightning Storm, Chain Lightning, and Thunderbolt. And here's the thing about shock damage that makes it uniquely dangerous. It drains magicka alongside health. Half of every hit is ripped straight from your magicka bar. Mages lose their ability to cast. Warriors relying on enchanted gear or healing spells get cut off from their safety net. He doesn't just hurt you, he cripples your resources. His mask reinforces this perfectly. It boosts shock spell damage by 25% while granting 50% shock resistance. Maximum electrical output with minimal vulnerability vulnerability to his own element. He's not just using lightning, he's built around it. Like Dukan, Zakrisos summons Seekers during the fight, maintaining that Solstheim multi-enemy encounter format that makes these DLC priests consistently harder than their mainland counterparts. You're not just dodging lightning bolts, you're managing Daedric backup while your Magicka bar evaporates. And veteran players don't get to coast through this fight on raw stats, because he's scaled up with you. That level 60 version hits harder, has more health, and casts faster than the version a level 25 player would face. Most Dragon Priests punish you for showing up too early. Zakrisos punishes you for showing up at all. But if Zakrisos adapts to power, the next priest on our list mastered it, and his story might be the most tragic on all of Solstheim. Azidal. Most Dragon Priests wear their masks as trophies. Azidal wears his as a weapon, and that distinction matters more than you'd think. Here's the deal. Azidal is a level 60 fire specialist sitting inside Kolbjorn Barrow on Solstheim, and his mask doesn't just sit on his face looking intimidating. It actively amplifies his fire spell damage by 25% while giving him 50% fire resistance. That means every fireball, every flame wall, every single fire spell he throws hits significantly harder than it should for a mage at his level. The mask isn't loot you collect after the fight. It's the reason the fight is so brutal in the first place. But here's where it gets complicated. Azidal doesn't just throw fire at you and call it a day. He can reanimate fallen enemies during the fight. So every Draugr you killed on your way through Kolbjorn Barrow, they can get back up and start swinging at you. The longer the fight drags on, the more bodies he has to work with. Most Dragon Priests are pure casters. Azidal weaponizes your own progress against you. And then there's the dungeon itself. Kolbjorn Barrow is tight. Narrow corridors, confined chambers, limited escape routes. Fire magic in an open field is dangerous. Fire magic in a stone hallway with nowhere to run is devastating. The architecture isn't working against Azidal. It's working for him. Every wall bounce, every lingering flame on the ground covers a higher percentage of your available space. This isn't accidental. The dungeon layout and his elemental specialization feel like an intentional pairing designed to punish you. Wood elves and lightly armored builds without fire resistance gear walk into this fight and notice immediately. The damage stacks fast. The room fills with reanimated enemies, and suddenly you're fighting a war on multiple fronts in a space barely big enough for one. He also guards the Black Book Filament and Filigree, one of Hermaeus Mora's gateways to forbidden knowledge. So the reward is significant, but earning it requires surviving the highest fire output of any Dragon Priest in the game inside a dungeon that amplifies every flame he throws. The combination of level 60 base power, multiplicative fire damage from his mask, reanimation capability, and a confined environment that turns his specialty into a death trap pushes Azidal firmly into the top 3. But if you think fire in a tight space is bad, wait until you meet the priest who was powerful enough to literally break Solstheim off the mainland, Valak, the Jailer. Every other Dragon Priest on this list wanted something. Power, immortality, worship, revenge. Valak wanted nothing. He was given a job, and he did it for thousands of years. Without recognition, without a mask, without a single reason to keep going except the fact that nobody ever told him to stop. Here's the thing about Valak. He was a full member of the Dragon Cult, a legitimate Dragon Priest with all the authority that title carried. But his role evolved into something no other priest ever had to deal with. After defeating Miraak, the first Dragonborn, the dragons appointed Valak as ruler of Solstheim with one sacred oath: make sure Miraak never escapes his imprisonment. He governed the island, yes, but that vigilance was the real assignment, not hoarding forbidden knowledge, not scheming for resurrection, ruling, watching, waiting, guarding a threat that was never supposed to resurface. And the reason he got that job? Because he earned it in the most violent way possible. Legend holds that when Valak discovered Miraak's betrayal of the dragons, the two fought in combat so catastrophically destructive that Solstheim physically broke away from the mainland of Skyrim. The entire island, ripped from the coast like a piece of torn paper. The geographic isolation of Solstheim, the fact that it exists as a separate landmass at all, is allegedly a scar from their duel. Two priests fought so hard they literally reshaped the map. After that, the dragons looked at Valak and said, You rule here, you watch him, forever. And Valak said yes. He maintained his vigil across thousands of years of undeath. No mask, no reward beyond a frozen island to govern, just an eternal assignment that he kept fulfilling long after the civilization that gave him that assignment had ceased to exist. The dragons died. The dragon cult collapsed. Empires rose and fell. Valak stayed at his post. His combat abilities aren't extensively documented compared to other Solstheim priests. He doesn't have a signature elemental specialty or a devastating magical arsenal that players write guides about. His power comes from something else entirely. Sheer endurance, historical weight, the fact that he simply refused to leave. When the Dragonborn arrives on Solstheim and Miraak's escape becomes imminent, Valak fights you. Not because he wants to, not because he's protecting treasure or guarding forbidden knowledge. He fights you because Miraak might get out, and that's still his job. Even at the end, after millennia of thankless service, he's still doing exactly what he was told to do. The absence of a mask reward when you defeat him feels appropriate. He isn't here to be looted. He's here because he never left. Every other dragon priest drops a mask because that mask defined them. Valak has no mask because nothing defined him except the man he was assigned to watch. His whole existence was shaped by one person, and that person is next, Miraak. Over 4,500 years old. That makes Miraak the oldest living human on Nirn. Not the oldest undead, not the oldest spirit, the oldest living human, preserved in a realm of infinite knowledge while civilizations rose and fell without him. And unlike every other dragon priest on this list, Miraak wasn't granted power by dragons. He was born with it, the original Dragonborn, capable of absorbing dragon souls as a birthright rather than a blessing. That distinction matters more than you think. See, Miraak served the dragons faithfully. He was their priest, their weapon, their loyal servant. Then he found a black book, and everything changed. Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge, reached through that book and handed Miraak something no mortal had ever possessed. The Bend Will Shout, a dragon language incantation capable of fully dominating dragons themselves. The only mortal level power in existence that could threaten dragon supremacy. And Miraak didn't hesitate. He turned that shout against his masters and devoured 21 dragon souls before his rebellion was finally suppressed. He didn't just fight dragons, he consumed them. Here's where it gets complicated. During the Dragon War, when Hakon One-Eye, Gormleth Golden Hilt, and Feldir the Old came begging for his help against Alduin the World Eater, Miraak refused. The three greatest heroes of the age, desperate enough to ask the most dangerous man alive for assistance, and he turned them away. He launched his own rebellion instead. Lore suggests he may have actually had the power to defeat Alduin if he'd chosen to help. He just didn't care. The dragons couldn't execute him, or wouldn't. Instead, they imprisoned him in Apocrypha, Hermaeus Mora's realm of infinite forbidden knowledge. Think about that for a second. The punishment for a man whose downfall was seeking forbidden knowledge was being locked inside an infinite library of forbidden knowledge. Either the dragons had a cruel sense of irony, or Mora orchestrated the entire thing from the beginning. Valak the Jailer, the entire previous entry on this list, exists solely because of Miraak. One dragon priest's entire purpose across thousands of years was watching for this man's escape, and the fight itself, nothing in Skyrim compares. At the summit of Apocrypha requires you to kill Miraak 4 times. You beat him down, he turns ethereal, teleports to the center of the arena, uses Bend Will to steal a nearby dragon's soul, and fully restores his health. Then you do it again, and again. No other dragon priest has a multi-death mechanic. No other enemy in the game forces you to watch them resurrect repeatedly while you burn through every resource you have. But here's the kicker. You don't actually beat him. After his 4th resurrection attempt, Hermaeus Mora himself intervenes, impaling Miraak and killing him mid-resurrection. The Daedric prince decided his servant had outlived his usefulness. That's the only reason the fight ends. Not because you were strong enough, because a god got tired of him. His unique robes, sword, staff, and mask all drop on that final death. And that mask is the only one in the entire game that reflects Hermaeus Mora's aesthetic, rather than the Nordic dragon cult style, because Miraak stopped being a dragon priest a long time ago. He became something else entirely. The most powerful dragon priest in Skyrim wasn't killed by the Dragonborn. He was betrayed by the same god he betrayed the dragons for, born with the power of a Dragonborn, corrupted by the knowledge of a Daedric prince, and ultimately discarded by both sides. That's Miraak, first Dragonborn, last dragon priest standing, and the only one on this list who needed a god to put him down. From buried truths to shared unease, Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries explained. The Falmer. The Falmer are disturbing because they aren't a fallen civilization. They're a civilization that was deliberately interrupted and forced to keep going in a broken form. Everything we encounter underground contradicts the idea that the Falmer are mindless creatures. They don't move randomly. They patrol defined areas. They set traps and choke points and ambush from positions that favor sound rather than sight. They retreat when overwhelmed and regroup in numbers. This isn't animal behavior. It's tactical behavior adapted to blindness. Their environment tells the same story. Falmer settlements aren't chaotic nests. They're organized spaces. Living areas are separated from guard routes. Choras aren't just present. They're managed. Eggs are protected. Adult Choras are deployed like tools or weapons. There's also clear evidence of ritual. Totems, markings, guarded chambers that serve no practical purpose in combat. These spaces exist for meaning, not survival, and meaning requires memory. Lore fills in what the environment implies. The Falmer were once the Snow Elves, a surface-dwelling civilization with cities, religion, and culture. After the Night of Tears nearly wiped them out, they turned to the Dwemer for refuge. The Dwemer didn't kill them. They blinded them, slowly, systematically, across generations, through toxins that removed sight and erased the ability to pass down history, language, and written knowledge. The Snow Elves weren't destroyed. They were rendered incapable of remaining what they were. This is what makes the Falmer so unsettling. They didn't lose a war. They didn't collapse internally. They weren't wiped out by time. They were modified. What we see in Skyrim isn't a species regressing into savagery. It's a society rebuilding itself under extreme constraint. Intelligence survived. Social behavior survived. What didn't survive was continuity. Every generation had to relearn what it meant to exist without ever knowing why they were underground in the first place. That means the Falmer aren't frozen in a tragic end state. They're still adapting, and adaptation doesn't stop. Given enough time, a culture shaped entirely by darkness, isolation, and hostility toward the surface will stabilize. Traditions will harden. Belief systems will form around survival rather than memory. Violence won't feel like cruelty. It'll feel like inheritance. Skyrim never lets us see where that process leads. Instead, it drops us into the middle of it as invaders, and never asks us to acknowledge what we're interrupting. There's no quest to cure the Falmer, no attempt to communicate, no recognition that what we're killing might be the early stages of a new civilization. That silence is intentional, because the Falmer aren't meant to be a tragedy you resolve. They're meant to be a reminder of what happens when survival is offered without mercy, and how long the consequences can last. And if the Falmer show what happens when a people are reshaped against their will, the next mystery asks the obvious follow-up: who had the power to do that to an entire civilization? And what happened when they finally went too far? The Dwemer. The Dwemer are disturbing because they didn't fear the gods. They believed existence itself was something that could be engineered, optimized, and ultimately overwritten. Everything the Dwemer left behind reflects a worldview that rejected reverence in favor of control. Their cities aren't built like temples or palaces. They're industrial, functional, purpose-driven. Pipes run through walls. Automatons patrol on schedules. Doors open and close based on logic, not ritual. Even their greatest achievements weren't acts of worship. They were experiments. The Dwemer studied the heart of Lorkhan not as a divine relic, but as a power source. Tonal architecture wasn't magic fueled by belief. It was mathematics, resonance, and sound used to alter reality at a structural level. To the Dwemer, gods weren't sacred beings. They were flawed systems that could be replicated or improved. And then there's the disappearance. When the Dwemer vanished, they didn't leave bodies. They didn't leave ghosts. In a world overflowing with restless spirits and lingering souls, the absence of Dwemer remains is almost louder than any ruin. What they did leave behind is even more unsettling. Fully operational cities. Automatons still follow commands. Defense systems still activate. Elevators still run. Their infrastructure didn't decay the way other civilizations' ruins did. It simply kept going, as if waiting for input that never came. That's what makes the Dwemer fundamentally different from every other lost civilization in Skyrim. They didn't collapse because of arrogance or decadence. They didn't fall to invasion or internal decay. They reached a point where their understanding of reality became incompatible with reality itself. When Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorkhan, the Dwemer weren't attempting destruction. They were attempting translation, rewriting their existence into a state that no longer relied on gods, fate, or limitation. And the result wasn't chaos, it was removal. The universe didn't punish them publicly. It didn't leave a warning. It simply corrected the problem by erasing the Dwemer from the equation entirely. That outcome reframes every Dwemer ruin you explore. These aren't monuments to failure. They're remnants of a civilization that got far enough to test the boundaries of existence, and crossed one that couldn't be crossed twice. The machines still running aren't proof of success. They're proof that the rules remained intact, even after the people who tried to rewrite them were gone. And if the Dwemer believed reality could be controlled, the next mystery reveals where that belief was pushed the furthest. Because beneath Skyrim itself lies the place where they tried to build a world that didn't need the surface at all. Blackreach. Blackreach is disturbing because it proves the Dwemer didn't just study reality. They tried to replace the world above with one that could survive without it. The scale of Blackreach immediately breaks expectations. This isn't a mine or a hidden laboratory. It's a vast, self-contained environment. Artificial skies glow overhead. Energy sources power cities spread across enormous distances. Transportation systems connect districts designed for long-term use. This place supports life. Falmer don't merely hide here. They inhabit it. Settlements are established. Territory is defended. Creatures have evolved around the constant glow of bioluminescent flora. Even the Crimson Nirnroot exists only here, altered by isolation in a way nothing on the surface ever was. Most unsettling of all is how intact it feels. Blackreach didn't collapse when the Dwemer vanished. It didn't cave in, flood, or decay into chaos. It kept functioning quietly beneath Skyrim, unnoticed, while history played out above, and Skyrim never explains how long it was down there. That silence changes what Blackreach represents. This wasn't an experimental side project. It was infrastructure, a contingency, a place designed to exist independently of surface politics, divine interference, or environmental collapse. The Dwemer weren't just preparing to transcend reality, they were preparing for the surface world to become irrelevant. Blackreach reframes Dwemer ambition entirely. They didn't just want godhood, they wanted autonomy from the entire structure of the world, a reality where sunlight, weather, and even history weren't necessary conditions for survival. And when the Dwemer disappeared, Blackreach didn't fail, it adapted. New inhabitants moved in. New ecosystems stabilized. The world below kept going without its creators, a replacement world that never needed to announce itself. That realization unsettles players because it suggests the surface of Skyrim isn't the foundation of the world. It's just the most recent layer. And if Blackreach shows what happens when a civilization tries to outlast the world itself, the next mystery reveals the opposite response to eternity. Those who didn't try to replace time, but instead learned how to rule by waiting for it. The Dragon Priests. The Dragon Priests are disturbing not because they survived death, but because death was never meant to stop them in the first place. Everything about the Dragon Priests suggests preparation, rather than desperation. Their resting places aren't crude tombs or mass graves. They're sealed structures built to endure centuries without decay. Stone doors lock from the inside. Inner chambers are protected by layered defenses. Traps are positioned not to keep intruders out forever, but to delay them. Then there are the masks. Each Dragon Priest mask isn't just a symbol of rank. It's a conduit, a vessel that stores power, enhances longevity, and preserves identity. Even separated from their wearers, the masks remain potent artifacts, capable of altering reality itself when gathered together. And when a Dragon Priest awakens, their behavior tells you everything you need to know. They aren't confused. They don't react like beings ripped out of time. They don't question where the world went. They rise, assess the situation, and act, as if the centuries between then and now barely register. This is what makes the Dragon Priests unsettling on a deeper level. They didn't cling to immortality out of fear. They weren't trying to escape death the way leeches or necromancers do. They treated death as an inconvenience. The dragon cult was built on certainty. Certainty that dragons were eternal, that Alduin would return, and that mortal rebellion was a temporary disruption, not an ending. From that perspective, waiting wasn't a risk, it was strategy. Time to the Dragon Priests wasn't something that eroded power. It was something that filtered out the weak. Empires would rise and fall. Faith would fracture. History would forget. But when the world circled back, and they believed it always would, they intended to still be there. And in an uncomfortable way, they were right. Dragons do return. Alduin does reappear. The old order almost reasserts itself. The only thing that truly changed was the presence of the Dragonborn, an anomaly they didn't plan for, which reframes the Dragon Priests entirely. They aren't relics of a failed regime. They're remnants of a system that assumed it would eventually resume control. A system that wasn't defeated, just interrupted. And if the Dragon Priests prove that some power structures don't die, but simply wait, the next mystery asks something even worse. What happens when authority doesn't even need to wait at all? Helgen, fate didn't choose you. It replaced someone. The opening of Skyrim is disturbing because it suggests you weren't chosen by destiny. You were simply the most convenient person to die. The game begins with you bound on an execution cart in Skyrim. heading toward Helgen. Everyone else on that cart has context. Ulfric Stormcloak is a political prisoner. Ralof is a captured rebel. Lokir is a thief who panics and tries to run. You, on the other hand, have no crime, no accusation, and no explanation. When the Imperial officer checks the list, your name isn't there. That should stop the execution. Instead, the response is chillingly casual. Forget the list. He goes to the block. No investigation, no delay, no concern. You're not being punished for something you did. You're being processed because the system has already decided someone needs to die. Even after Alduin attacks, nobody ever follows up. No one asks who you were, why you were there, or whether the execution was a mistake. The moment passes, and the world moves on. This reframes the entire narrative in a quiet but unsettling way. Skyrim is a world obsessed with prophecy, lineage, and divine selection. Yet your story begins without any of that. You aren't identified as special. You aren't recognized as important. You are entirely disposable, and that's the key detail. Destiny doesn't intervene because you were chosen. Destiny intervenes after you survive. The moment you live through something you weren't supposed to, the world adapts around you. Prophecy bends. Gods take notice. History rewrites itself to accommodate the anomaly that slipped through the cracks. In other words, the Dragonborn wasn't selected in advance. The Dragonborn was retrofitted into the story. That implication unsettles players because it strips away the comfort of fate. Greatness doesn't come from worthiness or prophecy. It comes from surviving a system that never intended to spare you. Helgen isn't the beginning of a hero's journey. It's proof that the world is willing to kill the wrong person and call it order. And if Helgen shows how easily a system can erase someone by mistake, the next mystery goes even further, exploring what happens when power no longer needs identity, proof, or even a living voice to function at all. The Daedric Princes. The Daedric Princes are disturbing because they don't corrupt the world by force. They reveal how easily people will do it themselves when the rules stop pushing back. Every Daedric encounter begins the same quiet way. A voice reaches out with clarity instead of menace. There's no grand deception, no moral camouflage. Each prince is upfront about who they are and what they value. Molag Bal doesn't hide domination behind noble language. He frames cruelty as inevitability. Boethia treats betrayal as a tool for sorting the strong from the weak. Sheogorath makes chaos sound playful, even therapeutic. None of them pretend their requests are harmless. They just make them specific. What's crucial is how these quests are structured. You're rarely rushed. You're given time to consider the request, understand the task, and weigh the reward. And those rewards matter. Daedric artifacts aren't cosmetic trophies. They're powerful, build-defining tools that meaningfully change how the game plays. Afterward, nothing reacts. The towns don't whisper, the guards don't comment, the world doesn't tilt toward punishment or redemption. From Skyrim's perspective, what you did registers as a completed objective, nothing more. That lack of response is where the unease lives. The Daedric Princes aren't testing your morality, they're testing the system. They operate in a space where consequences are delayed, diffuse, or invisible. By doing so, they expose a weakness in how meaning is enforced. If wrongdoing isn't immediately corrected, does it still matter? Skyrim never answers that question for you, and that's intentional. The moment the game labels your choice as evil, it turns the experience into a lesson. Instead, it treats your actions as data points, decisions made under conditions of clarity and incentive. This reframes the princes as something more subtle than villains. They're not trying to conquer Tamriel. They're running long-term experiments on agency. Each contract measures how far someone will go when the universe offers no immediate resistance and no visible cost. And the uncomfortable truth players discover is that saying yes doesn't require desperation. It often requires convenience. The task is manageable. The reward is useful. The harm is someone else's problem. By the time you realize what you've agreed to, you've already benefited, and the game has moved on. That lingering silence isn't a flaw. It's the point. Power doesn't always announce itself with spectacle. Sometimes it just asks politely and waits to see who accepts. And if the Daedric Princes show how easily authority works with consent, the next mystery strips even that away, revealing what happens when power continues operating without a voice, a body, or proof that it ever existed at all. The Night Mother. The Night Mother is unsettling in a way that sneaks up on you. At first, it feels almost theatrical. A corpse wrapped in ritual. A coffin hidden beneath a sanctuary. Whispers in the dark that sound just vague enough to be mystical without committing to anything concrete. Most players' first reaction isn't fear. It's skepticism, because the idea is absurd on the surface. An entire assassin order taking orders from a dead body. No witnesses, no verification. Just faith and a lot of murder. And Skyrim never actually proves the Night Mother speaks. That's the important part. You're told she does. You're shown characters reacting as if she does. You're rewarded for obeying her commands. But the game never steps in to confirm that the voice is divine, supernatural, or even external, which means there are only a few possibilities, and all of them are uncomfortable. Maybe the Night Mother really does commune with Sithis, acting as a living conduit between mortals and a god of nothingness. That's unsettling on its own, but at least it follows the internal logic of the world, or maybe the voice is something else. A Daedric influence, a psychic projection, a remnant of belief so strong it manifests as perceived instruction. Or maybe there is no voice at all. Maybe the Dark Brotherhood has been operating on tradition and expectation for so long that the system no longer needs a source. Orders are interpreted. Authority is assumed. Doubt is treated as heresy. And the machine keeps running. That's where the Night Mother stops being creepy and starts being disturbing. Because whether she's real or not doesn't change the outcome. People still die. Contracts are still fulfilled. Loyalty is still enforced. From the outside, the Dark Brotherhood functions efficiently, regardless of whether its spiritual core exists. The Night Mother doesn't need to be proven because questioning her would destabilize the structure built around her, and Skyrim never lets you challenge that. You can't expose the truth, you can't demand proof, you can't pull the thread and see what happens. You either participate or walk away. What makes this mystery resonate with players worldwide is how familiar it feels. Not as fantasy horror, but as a real-world pattern. Systems built on belief don't collapse when the belief is questioned. They collapse when people stop acting as if it matters. And the Dark Brotherhood hasn't reached that point. So the Night Mother remains, sealed in her coffin, issuing commands that may or may not be divine, while an entire organization continues to kill in her name. Skyrim never tells you which explanation is correct. It just lets the system persist, quietly, efficiently, and without accountability. And if the Night Mother shows how power can persist without proof or presence, the next mystery asks something even more uncomfortable. What happens when the world itself starts bending around a single person instead? The Dragonborn. The Dragonborn is disturbing because the world doesn't just respond to you, it waits for you. Over time, a pattern becomes hard to ignore. Major events in Skyrim don't resolve themselves. Civil unrest stalls. Dragons don't reappear until you do. Ancient threats sit dormant, sometimes for centuries, until the moment you step into the right place. Quests pause in a state of permanent tension. NPCs repeat the same lines. Entire regions remain frozen in crisis, until your involvement triggers progression. Even prophecy bends around your presence. It doesn't guide you forward so much as activate once you arrive. Then there's the way power accumulates. You absorb dragon souls effortlessly. You master abilities in days that took others lifetimes. Gods don't test you, they negotiate. Ancient forces don't overwhelm you, they adapt. The world seems less interested in stopping you than in accounting for you. And when you stop playing, everything stops with you. Wars don't conclude. Rebellions don't escalate. Suffering doesn't resolve or worsen. Skyrim holds its breath indefinitely. This reframes the Dragonborn as something far stranger than a chosen hero. You aren't simply powerful, you're a narrative pressure point, a stabilizing anomaly that allows stalled systems to move forward. The world doesn't revolve around you because you're righteous. It does so because nothing progresses without a focal point. That's unsettling because it strips away the romance of destiny. The Dragonborn isn't a savior sent to fix the world. You're a mechanism, a catalyst that forces resolution by existing where nothing else can. And that kind of power is isolating. You don't share it. You don't pass it on. You don't even fully understand it. Skyrim never acknowledges this directly, but the implication lingers. Without you, the world is inert. With you, it reshapes itself just enough to keep functioning, which raises an uncomfortable question players rarely like sitting with. Is the Dragonborn protecting the world, or is the world trapped in a state that only functions while you're watching? And if the Dragonborn shows how reality can bend around one person, the next mystery pulls back even further, revealing what happens when an entire war exists, not to be solved, but simply to continue. The Civil War. The The Skyrim Civil War is disturbing because it isn't meant to be resolved. It's meant to persist, regardless of who wins. On the surface, the war looks like a familiar choice: Imperials or Stormcloaks, order versus independence, stability versus identity. The game frames it like a decision that will define the future of Skyrim. But once you actually participate, the cracks start showing. Battles are strangely contained. Cities change banners, but daily life barely improves. Key figures survive or disappear with little consequence. Even after the war concludes, dialogue reflects exhaustion rather than relief. Guards sound tired. NPCs speak as if something unresolved still lingers. Most telling of all is how little the larger forces seem affected. The Thalmor remain influential no matter the outcome. Skyrim's economy doesn't recover. Social divisions don't heal, they harden. The winner inherits a weakened province filled with resentment, grief, and political instability, and the war only moves forward when you intervene. Without the Dragonborn, it stalls indefinitely, locked in a perpetual state of tension. That's what makes the Civil War unsettling. It isn't a story about victory, it's a story about decline. Both sides are compromised before you ever choose. The Imperials are stretched thin, enforcing an unpopular peace under foreign pressure. The Stormcloaks fight for cultural identity, but their leadership relies on exclusion and mythologized grievance. Neither side is positioned to rebuild Skyrim into something stronger than it was before. The war exists to drain resources, morale, and unity. From that perspective, the Civil War starts to feel less like a struggle for the future and more like a symptom of something already broken. Skyrim isn't on the brink of collapse, it's already sliding, and the war is how that decay expresses itself. What's especially uncomfortable is how familiar this feels. The conflict isn't driven by hope, it's driven by fatigue, fear, and the refusal to back down. Resolution would require compromise, and compromise isn't something either side is capable of without losing the identity they're fighting for. So, the war doesn't aim for healing, it aims for continuation, and no matter who you side with, that's exactly what you get. And if the Civil War shows a world slowly breaking under its own weight, the final mystery asks something even darker. What happens when even death stops being an escape? Sovngarde is disturbing because it reveals that death, even in a promised afterlife, is not an ending. It's just another place something powerful can reach. Sovngarde is introduced as a reward, a warrior's paradise reserved for those who lived and died with honor. The songs, the myths, the Hall of Valor, everything about it suggests finality, rest, completion. Then you arrive, and the first thing you notice isn't glory, it's emptiness. The landscape is vast but quiet. Figures wander the mist, detached and subdued. Conversations don't sound triumphant, they sound stalled, as if everyone is waiting for something that hasn't happened yet. The Hall of Valor itself feels less like a celebration and more like a shelter. That unease sharpens when the truth becomes clear. Alduin feeds here, not symbolically, not metaphorically. He consumes souls in Sovngarde itself, which means the Nord afterlife, the ultimate destination, isn't beyond danger. It's part of the food chain. This changes everything. Sovngarde isn't a final refuge. It's a holding space, a place where identity persists just long enough to be taken. The dead aren't resting, they're delayed, and that delay only lasts as long as something stronger isn't hungry. What makes this unsettling isn't just Alduin's presence, it's what his presence implies about the structure of existence. Even the afterlife is subject to predation. Even gods can starve. Even eternity can be interrupted. Skyrim presents Sovngarde as beautiful because it has to be. If it looked like a nightmare, the truth would be obvious. Instead, the horror is quieter. The realization that no place is truly outside the system. Not the world of the living, not the realm of the dead, not even a paradise promised by myth. Sovngarde doesn't comfort you, it warns you. And once you understand that even death can be compromised, you're left with one final uncomfortable thought. If there's nowhere beyond reach, then nothing in Skyrim was ever truly safe to begin with. If you enjoyed Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries and want to see more, click the video on screen now.